to Beard Talk 4.10. 12. I'm your host, Brian Cook, and my beard is a salt and pepper full beard. I think we've got two more full beards with us.
Mine's probably the grayest, I think, of the three of us.
Yeah, probably. And then that's Seth, and Adam's here.
The gray's hidden underneath.
So Adam is actually here because he's seen a lot of these guys in person. We also have a special guest from 24/7, Steve Lorenz. How you doing? We
lost Steve.
We lost Steve. Well, we're going to work to get Steve back on the line, but Michigan flips Dax Hill back in an all-timer in terms of Michigan recruiting history. They pick up Cornelius Johnson, who I have much higher hopes for than Cornelius Johnson. Was he a Johnson? I don't know, but he spelled his name wrong.
Right.
So I was like, that's probably not going to fly, and of course he doesn't really make it here. Cornelius is the correct way to say it. 4-star outside receiver from Connecticut, which brings Michigan's recruiting class up to 27. A couple of them haven't quite signed yet, but I don't think there's really any concern from Michigan's end as far as a flip for either of those guys. Steve, do we have you now?
Yeah, I'm here, guys. Sorry.
No problem. So Steve Lorenz of 24/7, how's your day been?
Actually, smoother than any signing day I can remember, to be honest with you. So not bad.
Yeah,
got it over early.
I mean, there were only, I think, 3 announcements that Michigan's really paying attention to, and 2.
Right, and I think the outcomes of each of those were pretty clear too.
Right.
There's
what? All right. I think we lost him again. All right. Well,
we lost him again.
The technology is something we're working on, but we thought we would go through and kind of talk about every single one of these recruits. Usually we do this on the official signing day, but this is pretty much the official signing day at this point. So starting at the top, Cade McNamara, a 4-star quarterback out of Las Vegas, Nevada, who kind of gives you that Tate Forcier, Shea Patterson vibe. He's not quite as highly rated as Shea, but he's, not the biggest guy in the world, but pretty mobile.
Very mobile. I think he's one of those guys, kind of like Patterson, who's better on the run almost from his tape. He's very accurate on the move. I actually liked him better that way than when he was just in the pocket throwing deep bombs.
And he's not a guy that you got to see a full game of.
No, this is based on a highlight reel. That's true. But there are a lot of nice throws, almost all of them on the move, on that highlight reel. Yeah.
And the concerns for those kind of guys is like, okay, can they really operate from a clean pocket? Something that you're not going to get to too much data on for a couple of years. But in terms of what Michigan appears to want from their quarterbacks going forward, I think he fits that pretty well.
And one other thing I think that's interesting about him is the way he throws. He has almost a sidearm delivery, kind of like.
Is that an option or a requirement? Because if it's an option, I like it. If it's a requirement,
yeah, I don't know.
Yeah,
we're gonna see that's gonna be interesting to watch to see what happens when he gets here. I know Harbaugh's not a fan of messing with guys throwing motions, but
I mean, a sidearm delivery is like
it's not quite completely like
it's like a
Bronson Arroyo or whatever that
right.
baseball player was. Yeah, but it's like 3/4. But that is what I thought of at one point when I was watching it.
It was
interesting.
Ominous.
Now the other thing is, since we don't have a full game of him, maybe he just changes his arm slot. In which case,
and they only put the sidearms on the highlight film,
or that's what he does on the move.
Yeah. So changing an arm slot is a good thing for a quarterback. Having a weird one is maybe not the best.
We'll see how this goes.
Especially when you're one of those guys who's listed at 6'1", and it's like, maybe that's slightly generous. But in terms of what we saw from Shea Patterson this year on the ground, he's a guy who can definitely match that. And with Milton being asked to run a little bit more than he was in high school, and obviously Dylan McCaffrey is a guy who can move. Like, you kind of see this pattern for Michigan quarterbacks going forward where the Harbaugh thing where he actually wants his guys to be legitimate dual threats where they can rack up 200, 300, 400, 500 yards a year is something we're going to see going forward.
And he certainly fits the mold.
Yeah, that's why I actually wasn't too fussed about losing Harrison Bailey in the 2020 class, because I was just like,
that one was confusing to me just because he is such a pure drop back passer.
Right. And
I'd rather we keep moving in this direction where we have him as a run threat as well.
I've always wanted to have that ability from your quarterback, and I think that's the same thing that Jim Harbaugh thinks too.
Yeah, let's play 11 on 11.
And then there's Zack Charbonnet, the near 5-star running back out of California. Do we have Steve yet?
Think so, Steve? He's coming and going. I think we got a problem with our phone connection here.
All right. Well, why don't you try to use my phone? Anyway, Charbonnet is a guy who, when I first started looking at Michigan's options at running back in this class, kind of way back almost a year ago, he was the only real option on their board. Mm-hmm. And at that point, he was a guy who was kind of barely inside the top 250. And so I was like, this situation does not look really good for Michigan. But they secure Charbonnet, and then he starts kind of a death march up the rankings, despite not going to a single camp.
What you have read, I'm sure, and heard from analysts over and over is that he was the number one back in the nation on their board. So they got the guy who they feel is the best in the country. And I think as
Michigan's board.
Michigan's board, yes. He was the best back in the country to them. And so then you see this season, he goes out and really dominates against pretty good competition.
Yeah, he plays for Oaks Christian, so that school is one of those schools that recruits a lot and has a lot of talent, and they play a lot of serious schools. Mm-hmm. And the way he's treating these defenses, it's a bull in a china shop. It's an 8th grader beating up on 6th graders. It's he runs with power. He's in that kind of A-train mold, except his balance is really exceptional. Like, he does a lot of stuff where you're able to grind out 6, 7, 8 yards after contact in a way that not a lot of backs can. He kind of reminds me of Devion Smith, but Devion Smith had some vision issues, obviously, and his long speed was nil. Mm-hmm. And Charbonnet is a guy who is like Devion Smith if Devion Smith was verging on 5-star status.
Yeah, he's not necessarily the fastest guy in the nation.
Right.
He doesn't have breakaway speed, but he's elusive.
And
the way that he creates angles for himself in the open field is really interesting to watch. And I think what you said one day when I got kind of carried away in Slack with posting Charbonnet clips is that he's 5-star True Wilson, because in the videos that I found, he picks up blitzes and he's good at it too, which you don't often see.
That's
high
true.
schoolers.
Like, there's a couple of kind of single game highlight reels which I really like, because often when I see a running back highlight, what I want to see is how he gets tackled. And if you're just running off into the end zone every time, it's not really all that informative. But a single game reel of the level that he was consistently able to put up is something that I think is the reason that a lot of these guys are really excited to see him at the All-Star game, where he will either become the 5-star that he's been on the verge of becoming, or kind of stick, or maybe even drop a little. But in terms of, this is a guy who's pretty much the best case scenario for Michigan's running back recruiting. That's Michigan came a long way from where it looked like they were going to be early in this cycle.
He seems like an instant impact guy to me. I think you can plug him in and he
Absolutely.
can play.
I mean, he looks like a college guy right now.
Yeah, he does.
And if he's able to pick up the blitz protection scheme, I don't think that there's any question that he's going to be able to do it physically. Mm-hmm. And he's a guy who I think is going to slot right into that rotation with Evans and True Wilson, especially because he brings something a little bit different than both of those backs.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Stylistically, that's what I think they were looking for, and they got him, and I think it makes the loss of Eric Gray tolerable.
I mean, Eric Gray was so we should talk about this because we're going to move into the wide receiver section. Okay. Eric Gray is this little scat back out of Tennessee who didn't play very good competition, racks up 3,000-yard seasons on the regular, looks extremely quick and speedy, and you're kind of like, well, Michigan has definitely wasted that guy's talent several times over in the past decade, and they go get Eric Gray. And then at the same time, they have Giles Jackson, George Johnson III, and maybe Mike Sainristil, depending on exactly what's happening. Could you mute yourself, Seth? And it seems like there's kind of a sea change in what there's a sea change in kind of what Michigan's expecting out of their slot receivers.
I think that's probably my biggest takeaway from the class, is that they clearly needed and wanted to add speed at that position and went out and did that with multiple guys.
It seems like there's almost too many of them. I'm not that fussed about Gray decommitting because I'm like, we still got that guy in this class maybe 2 or 3 times over.
That's what I've been trying to tell people for a couple weeks as well. It's a loss, of course, anything is, but Giles Jackson, right?
Right, yeah.
That's lightning in the slot. And then Sainristil, like we were saying, he's probably going to plug in there as well. There are guys that they didn't have before. It's nice to have a route artisan, but I think we saw in the last game of the year that it's also nice to have speed.
Yes.
Sorry to bring that up.
Very delicate way to put that.
Yeah, mesh.
So let's start off with Giles Jackson, since we mentioned him a couple of times. He's going to be fun.
He is.
If Michigan had used some of these guys more appropriately, it would be a fun thing to compare him to some of these guys, but they haven't. So when you bring up Dennis Norfleet, it just makes everybody sad. But that's kind of what you're getting for this guy. He is tiny. He's able to do 180-degree tackle breaking, where he's seemingly at knee level with against other defenders. He's a great power turner. He's very, very quick. He's able to change directions in a flash, and yeah, I mean, this guy comes to Michigan, and you're kind of like, you should have gone to Oregon, right?
I mean, in a logical world,
right?
But I guess the one thing I can say about him is that they're making some kind of concerted effort to get that type of guy in. So I'm optimistic that they'll attempt to utilize him or that type of player more effectively.
Yes, that's the hope.
Because if you just have one and it's Norfleet, it's like
and then he's
how do you end up
the
here?
designated jet sweep guy,
right? And then you're tipping everything. And
I mean, it's not just that; it's that it doesn't feel like he's a complete player on the field, and so then that guy doesn't really threaten you in a way that a dual threat guy. Even Steve Breaston, his senior season, people are like, okay, Breaston is going to be the deep threat, and then he got open over the top all the time, and he couldn't make the catches. So whatever Jackson turns into, it's really up in the air. I love his highlight film. It's very jazzy.
Right. It's fun.
Yeah,
it's very fun. And Cade McNamara was his 7-on-7 quarterback, so they've got a connection there. And so McNamara, going back to him for just 1 second, was valuable not just in that he sort of fits that mold of the dual threat guy, but also that he recruited very well for Michigan and brought some of these guys in.
And Giles Jackson is a guy who may not take a very hard look at Michigan unless McNamara is at his ear all the time. But he's a guy who will be lightning in the slot, and then you've got George Johnson III, who's pretty much the same thing. In the tradition of Michigan slot receivers, he was a active dual threat quarterback in high school. One of the guys that if we could ever talk to
Steve,
Steve, he would.
We're gonna try again at the break. He can't hear us is the problem.
Okay, well, he was one of the guys who, when we talked to Steve about a month ago, he was like, these are the guys that I think are going to move up, and the other one was Trente Jones, who did. So, he's in the same mold. Probably going to take a little bit longer, because the interesting thing about Jackson is he was kind of a running back, wide receiver hybrid when he was a junior. His senior film is all slot receiver.
Yeah.
So he'll be relatively polished and ready to go. Johnson is going to take a minute, and with guys like that, it's always like, okay, can they catch? Can they run routes? But the reason that Michigan brought this guy in is because if he can do those things, he will also be a very fun yards after the catch guy.
There are a lot of guys in this class with high upside at positions that they may not have played a ton. But, it's okay, I think, to take a few flyers on these guys that are more athletes than necessarily one-dimensional. He plugs into this certain spot. And I think we have, Pesakikson also? Sort of.
Yes.
Did I miss Sainer still?
No,
we're saving it for you, Seth.
So, and then Johnson is also a guy who's like, his main competition in this recruiting battle was Florida State. So he's low rated, but he's got a pretty good recruiting story.
Yeah.
And that's always important for the 3 stars. It's like, okay, who is the other guy after you?
True.
In Mike Sainristil's case, it was Virginia Tech, where he was committed to forever, and we had possibly the site's longest standing ready hello post for him.
Oh my God!
Which was written up over the summer.
Yeah,
it was like
because Brown went out and visited him, and everyone kind of figured, okay, this flip's going to happen now, and then it kind of I guess it happened silently. So I wrote the thing up thinking it was going to happen in the middle of that whole commit fest. So it was while we were editing all those articles, and then all of a sudden this one pops up too. So I watched the film. There wasn't much out there on a guy from Massachusetts.
Yeah.
And then he was, I guess, silent for a while. And then we thought he was going to commit again. So then I rewrote it up again in September. And then that didn't happen then. So each time I had to, like, almost rewrite the post again. It was like, if this guy this guy held off again.
You were going to hunt him down? That's not.
We were going to see how elusive he really is.
MGo blog does not condone hunting down recruits. That is not something that we are endorsing at this moment. But you guys are talking about him as a wide receiver. And I think for Virginia Tech, he was like a slot corner.
Yeah, but if you look at most of his senior film, or at least the highlights that he has put out, slot receiver.
Slot receiver all the way?
Almost. There are a few plays in there at safety or slot corner, but in general, it's quarterbacks that missed badly, and it's almost like a punt return. He's returning moon balls.
Right.
Yeah.
And so it might as well be
So
a deep
He's
pass.
got the athleticism to stick with guys. He's always going to be a smaller dude who doesn't really get up a lot, so...
Okay, but so there are 3 slot receivers in this class.
Yes.
At least one of them is going somewhere else in terms of a position. And St. Ristel is the guy who has the cleanest fit on the other side of the ball.
That's true. That's true. Though Johnson could take a while to develop.
Yeah, I don't know exactly what.
St. Ristel's
You sort of sit on
also,
him
I
for a
think, a
while.
lot smaller than the other. I mean, they all look like slots, but St. Ristel's like listed 20 pounds lighter.
Jackson is tiny. He's a tiny man.
St. Ristel's listed at 5'10", 175. So
corner-ish.
5'8", yeah.
He's not 5'10".
I'm just saying, like,
5'8",
even if he is
160,
a slot corner, that's a valuable thing to have,
absolutely.
especially these
Yeah.
days. As, of course, we learned.
Right.
So if he's a very fast and nimble slot corner, I think that's something that might be his future as well.
But as you're talking about a second ago, positional versatility. It's huge, and that's what it seems looking for here is at certain positions, speed overall, because then you can flip them to different spots if you need to.
So the 2 outside guys, you did take in a full game of Quintel Kent.
I did.
And how did that
Almost
go?
a full game.
Okay, almost a full game.
Yeah. I think he could develop into quite something. He's very good at adjusting to deep balls. I thought he was a good route runner. Overall, I was impressed with how polished he was. And I think that might come from the school that he plays at. They're a powerhouse.
He's at St. Ed's?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So that's
And
Kyle
now Michigan has
Kalis'
3.
skill?
Yeah.
Yeah.
They've got a preferred walk-on from there.
Okay.
Jordan Castleberry.
Kolazar.
And Colasar, the gray shirt. Yeah.
So, I mean, he's a guy who, Bill Green, who's one of the Ohio guys for 24/7, saw 3 or 4 times and kept moving him up every time he saw him. Now, that only got him to, like, middling 3-star territory, but that at least is the trajectory that you want.
And it's the guy who has actually seen him who's trying to move him up,
Yeah.
right? The guy who is sort of the expert in that particular recruiting area, who is the main voice saying this guy should be ranked higher. So I trust him absolutely.
So, I mean, some comparisons here to Ronnie Bell. They kind of seem the same physically.
Yeah, I think that's fair.
They were very productive, especially as seniors in high school. They weren't heavily recruited. I don't really know who the competition was for Kent.
I'm not sure either.
It wasn't anybody in the Power 5, I don't think, by the time Michigan picked him up. So that's a sleeper Michigan gets in on and could develop into a good player. But if you have wide receiver classes on the outside that are back-to-back years that guy, that starts to make you nervous. So Michigan picking up Cornelius Johnson this fine Wednesday is a big deal, especially because
Not according to Rivals.
There are always differences
We like
of opinion
Cornelius Johnson.
Right.
for recruiting services, but I have no idea how Cornelius Johnson. So if you go click on his huddle tape on the site today, just watch the first 3 minutes, and then go look at his ranking on Rivals, like the position ranking, and just scroll. And scroll and scroll and scroll.
Past the guys from Wake Forest.
You will scroll past 4 guys committed to Arkansas, 2 guys committed to Wake Forest, and 1 guy committed to Western Michigan. That's where he is. He's the number 69 wide receiver in the country to Rivals in like what may be the most ridiculous ranking of any Michigan recruit this year. I mean, there's a couple others I have like questions with, but like that guy, and he had Penn State, he had Notre Dame, he had Stanford, and could have gone to any of those schools.
Alabama.
Well, Alabama was like.
I don't know how committable it was.
Yeah,
but he lists them as.
Well, he went to the opening, and he
Yeah.
did a really good job of the opening, and that's like, okay,
Yeah.
well, Rivals doesn't go to the opening anymore. So they didn't see that. They didn't consider that. And then after that, there is this kind of flirtation with Bama where I think he got one of those offers to camp or visit, that kind of thing. And so then the Bama moms are like, yeah, watch out for this guy. He might come in and be part of the class. And that really didn't go anywhere. And I don't know if that was more Alabama side or more Cornelius Johnson's side. Because his mom went to Michigan Medical School. I think I saw this, but I couldn't find it to link to it. I think both of his parents graduated from Stanford.
I saw that somewhere too and couldn't
Yeah.
find it last night either. I was looking for that too because I wrote last night that I thought he was a Stanford lean for the longest time.
Well, he was.
And
then for
then I
whatever
couldn't
reason,
find that proof. Like
Yeah.
it would make sense. Yeah.
So, but he his offer list was like Notre Dame, Michigan, Northwestern, Stanford, UVA, Pitt, West Virginia, and then Bama was like floating around there. So he was really focused on a high academic school. He was never going to go anywhere else, I don't think. And so that's a really good fit for Michigan, and I think it speaks to his likelihood of realizing his talent. And then I think his actual level of talent is real good.
I think so too. I think he's more in the Treek Black mold than.
Yeah, and that's a guy, or kind of a Mara Darbo. He seems a
Yeah.
little bit faster, but he is playing in Connecticut, so a lot of people would see him fast playing in Connecticut. He ran a 4.58 40 at the opening regional, which isn't great, but for a guy with his skills, I think that's plenty good enough.
Yeah, and he's starting out at 6'4", and
he's
more
more
over
of
200.
He's like
so
6'3", so he's like 6'2" and a half. So
yeah.
we're gonna round that up.
Okay, that's what I was doing too, bumping it up again.
Yeah, you're rounding it up again. That's not really rounding it. That's more adding.
I bumped.
Oh, you bumped.
Yeah.
I see. So that's just a huge get for Michigan, and I can't help but notice that he really gave a shout out to the interim wide receiver coach when he committed.
And he's not the only one too. In this lead up to signing day, I've seen a few articles about Ben McDaniels. So, do you think
He might be the guy?
the job?
I mean, I
heard Ray Roundtree, I know, is making a name for himself.
He's hanging
as
around,
well.
but like if he had the inside track to be the inside candidate, he probably would have gotten the bump up. So, but if McDaniels gets the job, that's fine. That's what I want at that position. I want a recruiter, and I want a guy who people like, which is maybe not a common thing with our previous wide receiver coach. So, good get for McDaniel, and Michigan can now go into the next class without absolutely needing a big timer at wide receiver.
Exactly.
It'd be nice, but it's not a big requirement.
And congratulations for getting through that without mentioning sharks.
We all thought about sharks.
I went on, I did the round table, and at some point McElwain came up, and Sam did the same thing. He was like, congratulations to you for keeping your head and not swearing constantly for the last 30 minutes. And I was like, really? I don't swear. I just make up crazy shark stories as my voice raises up 3 octaves.
Well, Michigan State's stealing his class right now, so.
Anyway, moving on to tight end, Eric All is out of Ohio. Is that correct? Yes.
Fairfield, I think.
Another guy that Michigan kind of got in on early, and people were like, who is this guy? And I don't even know why we're recruiting him. And then he gets a pretty solid 4-star bump from 2 of the 3 services, and he's a composite 4-star. And then you see the camp video, and you see why. He's 6'4". He has super long arms, like freaky long arms, and he's at 7-on-7, and he looks like a jumbo wide receiver who I'd recruit as a jumbo wide receiver. Michigan, he's like 215 maybe though.
Yeah.
So Michigan's going to want to put 30 pounds on him. It's going to be probably a red shirt and see what you get later. But as in terms of one of those flex tight ends, he really fits the bill.
He was ranked almost exactly where Eubanks was too.
We saw him. Well, David went and got film on him, and he was talking to their team videographer, who said that it wasn't just the game that David watched, but that they were using him as more of a blocking tight end in the first few games of the season. So what our film shows is not so much that athleticism, but we know it's there from the camp camp videos. But I was really impressed with him as a blocker. He's good.
So I mean, that's a lot of it is Sean McCune.
He's got it.
Sean McCune is not the biggest guy in the world. He's
Right.
not one of those Wheatley Asiasi types. And he had some, mental issues because they put so much on his plate mid-season. But like when he makes contact, he wins those blocks, and that's something that you can't say about every guy, especially not every flex guy. So
Yeah, I think that's a good all comparison. He's like that as well.
but I think he's probably got more receiving upside than McCune because he's very fluid. He's a really good athlete, and so is McCune. But as we've kind of seen McCune develop, it's not like he's a game breaker downfield, and I think all has that potential.
I agree with you. Just as a blocker, I think he's like McCune in that there's the want to, and there's he's maybe a step ahead of other guys coming in at the same position. A typical freshman blocking or flex tight end, as you were saying, might not be that great as a blocker. I mean, even Jake Butt turned out to be just a.
He was in the way.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
But all I was impressed with his ability to identify linebackers and get to them.
And
like he made the right decision consistently.
And is this a high school team that just doesn't throw very much because they don't have a quarterback?
In the beginning of the season, that was what it was.
Okay.
They were running a lot. Yeah, and I think Michigan actually offered their running back right after we saw all. So something they were doing impressive. 2020. Yeah.
So
they ran a lot.
So another flex tight end for Michigan, and one that has a lot of upside. The offensive line class is 6 men deep, and you've seen 4 of them in person, or you've done whole games for 4 of them.
They're huge.
So the 2 guys who are not on that list are Jack Stewart, who's a 6'5", maybe a swing guy, but probably a guard out of Connecticut. Don Brown stomping grounds, not a guy who had a ton of recruiting hype or a ton of offers, but offensive lineman in a not particularly well recruited space who did come in camp. That's a flyer that you're pretty comfortable taking.
Yeah, I know he's fairly athletic, and from what I've read, the first thing Ed Warner looks for is physicality, and that shows up on his film right away. Now, I know it's Connecticut, but there there is something different about a guy who finishes a block, even if he doesn't necessarily have to.
Right.
And he does. So he checks that box at least for them.
And, I mean, I'm willing to give Don Brown a pass on basically every New England recruit.
Yeah, me too.
And that's, as the 6th OL in this class, that's completely fine. Maybe he'll work out.
Mm-hmm.
If he doesn't work out, Michigan will probably get someone else who works out. So they liked him enough to take him, and they're really stocking up on the OL, so that's completely fine. The other guy that we don't have a full game of wisdom from is Trevor Keegan, who's a much bigger recruit. Michigan won out over Georgia, Ohio State, Penn State for him. 6'6", 310 pounds out of, was he literally out of Evanston, or he's just from around Evanston, I think?
I think just around there.
Yeah. So his
Crystal Lake South.
So
Crystal Lake.
His parents were like big Michigan fans. His coach was a big Michigan fan. But there was kind of this lull in the middle of his recruitment where people thought he was going to go to Georgia. And then Ed Warner came in and rescued that recruitment. And as long as Michigan didn't blow it, like they were going to get this kid. And they didn't blow it. So he's a guy who the recruiting sites, there's a little bit of a distinction where they're like, he can be a right tackle, but he can't be a left tackle. And that's a little... That distinction's a little fine for me, because I mean, OL are so hard to project. You can't imagine this guy, reshaping his body a little bit and getting that little bit extra quickness in his kick step. Yeah, you can't. So he's got the body type for it, and maybe he's not a guy who projects as an A+ pass protector, but he's a guy who can be at least a B+ left tackle in the air, and then on the ground, he can do some work.
Yeah, I think it's fair to project interior versus exterior, not necessarily left or right.
Right, yeah.
And I agree with you. He's an outside guy. He could develop in pass pro. I haven't seen a lot of it yet, so
it's also
there's definitely upside there.
On so many of these high school teams, they just don't do it very much.
Yeah,
so
exactly. That's the same thing with all these guys. That's what I always end up writing in Future Blue Originals is that you see it a few snaps a game, and and they're going to get work when they get here. So
Alan True, who's a 24/7 analyst who is in his area, thought that all of his pass protection issues were just technique based. So then, Rivals and a couple other teams were like, nah, not so much. So that's a conflict that we'll find out, but a definite tackle, and every Michigan fan wants to see definite tackles. No question tackles.
Exactly.
This man is a tackle. There is no question.
And we're talking about the issues with this guy, but he ends up being a composite, almost top 150 guy. So
right, yeah.
Not a bad kid to pull if you're going to have somebody that you want to start molding.
Well, and
fine.
his recruiting story is also a very good one, where it's like he's expected to commit to Georgia. Georgia is pretty irritated when that doesn't happen. So Michigan gets a little bit back for Isaiah Wilson. And, these are obviously committable offers where you have in-homes coming from coaches and official visits and stuff. And that's the good stuff.
Absolutely.
Alabama thinks I'm worthy of a camp slot.
Right.
The other obvious tackle in this class is Trente Jones, who you do have a full game's worth of experience on. He's an interesting guy because he plays at, is it Buford or Grayson? It's Grayson.
Grayson.
Yeah.
It's Grayson. Yeah.
So Grayson is one of the most insanely talented teams in America. And he plays opposite Wanya Morris, who's a 5-star going to Tennessee. And, if Steve was around, he would be telling us that, his coaches have been telling him that they think he's the better player. And he
Really?
or at least he had the better season.
Yeah. He graded out higher.
Let's say that.
Okay.
He graded out higher.
So, Morris might be a little bit bigger and might have more upside, and that's why he's a 5-star. But in terms of, if you were going to play one of these guys immediately next year, they would probably go with Trente Jones.
Yeah.
And his postseason move on 24/7 reflects that.
So Morris, when I watched that tape, is a very large person, as any 5-star left tackle is. Jones is athletic and looks like he has no bad weight on him. His footwork was excellent in pass protection, and he was pass protecting more than I've seen most other linemen do in just the other games that we've scouted.
Right,
so I feel a little bit more confident talking about his pass pro, and his athleticism was just off the charts.
Yeah.
And he's playing against some really tough competition, too.
Right, he's
the
playing
defensive
against tough
ends in that league.
competition. He's playing in a context that is kind of like playing at IMG where, you're actually going to get to pass protect because you actually have a quarterback. That's what happens when you have a bunch of talent on your team. So, the interesting thing about him is 24/7 had a really good article a few months ago, maybe it was several months ago at this point, where they're talking about what are the aspects that project to the NFL from high school. And one of the main things was, you don't want to have a tackle who's, 350. You don't want to have, a guy like Damian Mama, who was a 5-star a couple years ago, who's doing nothing at USC because he was just a super huge guy. And a guy like Mike Onwenu is maybe the exception to the rule. But what you want is a guy who you can either maintain at your current weight or even put some on.
Yeah, exactly.
So, that's what Jones is. So he's a guy who might be at playing weight, maybe not this year, but next year, and doesn't have to lose a lot of weight, doesn't have to reshape his body, doesn't have to understand how his body works now after radically changing it.
Right.
And so that's all pretty good because it makes him easier to project.
It does. You're just starting from a better place with him.
Right. So you can have more confidence that Jones is going to be a good college lineman than, say, a Jack Stewart.
Right.
Because of his competition level, because of his pass pro, and because of his body type. So that was a really good pickup, and a guy that I think Warner identified really early and went after early in his tenure as Michigan's OL coach.
They definitely rode that wave up with him.
And they've done that with a number of kids in this class, like All and Charbonnet, a little bit less of an extent with Quintel Kemp, but David Ojabo on defense. They've gotten some guys who are risers. So I think they've did a good job scouting this year.
Oh yeah, the talent identification piece has definitely been there.
Moving on to the interior, Carson Barnhart is an in-state guy who is listed at 6'4", so he's maybe not ideal for tackle, but people are talking about him as a swing guy.
Yeah.
And he was the subject of a Future Blue Originals for us.
He was, and in that he played primarily tight end, and not just a blocking tight end, but he was running routes consistently.
He's
and
listed
he was
at 275
playing against
nobody.
I just felt very bad for these guys he was playing against. David and I were up there with their coaching staff, and we just kept moving down a little bit because they were very frustrated. Okay.
The opposing guys?
Yes,
Yeah,
they were up there on top of the press box with us, just screaming about things in general. And I can understand why. He's a mismatch
He's
for
at
anybody.
Paw-Paw, right?
But he's at Paw-Paw.
Yeah.
He's just an excellent athlete. That's what he brings to the table first and foremost.
He's a
He'll probably have to
basketball
pack out a
player,
little bit.
too.
And that's when he started to pick up a lot of his offers, was during
Yeah.
basketball season. His basketball coach was standing next to us on top of the press box and started telling us about what he had heard from the head coaches who had come to visit, and it was all about footwork.
Right.
It was all about footwork with him. So he's a guy I think I heard on the Michigan Insider today in an interview with him that he's 6'4" and 3/4. So he wants you to know
we're gonna
that
bump
he's
it up,
edging towards 6'5",
bumping
and
it up.
possibly.
That's like my
could
daughter
flip
is 4 3/4.
Yes, exactly, exactly. Like, just everyone needs to know.
Yeah.
As someone who is 5'11" and 3/4, I understand that. But he's like you said, he's a guy who might flip outside in the future.
Right.
And if he does, you got to think that with the footwork piece, he'll be
Right.
good in pass pro.
Probably more.
Will
of
take some time. But
probably more of a Mason Cole-ish development cycle.
Yeah,
with
probably.
if he plays tackle, where
Yeah.
like he can get to pretty good, but probably doesn't have the arm length.
a B+.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So a guy who I think is a good bet to be a contributor. I mean, offensive lineman. But again, we're talking about guys who maybe need to put on a little weight, have a lot of good athleticism, and have feet, and that's pretty much the theme of this class. Nolan Rumler, I think, is he the oldest commit in this class?
Yeah, I believe so.
Steve told me like 4 years ago you should put in a crystal ball on this guy when he was a sophomore. I was like, okay, Steve. And lo and behold, it turns out to be true. Rumler started off the cycle as like a top 50 player,
Mm-hmm.
and it's kind of slowly moved down the list. And you don't want guys who are getting downgraded, but this was a situation where he was very obviously a D1 recruit early in his career, has remained very obviously what he is, but then they just keep inserting guys above him because they find people.
Exactly.
So his drop over the course of his recruitment doesn't really concern me. Also, he's a guard.
Yeah.
He's very much a guard. He's not going to play tackle, and those guys often kind of slip down the lists as they go along because there's no thrilling first-round guards.
He's still a top 10 guard, which is
Right, yeah.
Yeah.
So we often talk about how guys who get bumped often don't get bumped enough, and
Mhm.
guys who fall often don't fall enough, like Shane Morris,
right.
Derek Green, and that kind of
Yeah.
stuff. So I think his fall is completely explicable and not something that is worth being concerned about. Otherwise, he's hopefully what Kyle Kalis was supposed to be.
Mm-hmm.
He just has to have the mental side together, but he's a rough and tough mauling guard.
I think he's played varsity all 4 years,
I believe so.
and they've gone deep. They might have won the state title every year, at least this
not
year.
every year. I don't.
Well,
remember.
he's played a lot of football.
Yeah.
Is what I wanted to
He's
get at.
old enough
He's
that he's
polished.
the last guy
Yeah.
in my scout database.
There you go.
The last thing I got from Scout.com is he was a 4-star, number 15 OT
Wow.
back in however long ago it was.
But I mean, he's like can't say an offensive lineman is a sure thing because Patrick Kugler was a sure thing, of the surest of all sure things, like the son of the Steelers offensive line coach. So, but he's in one of those OL classes where it's like this is a guy who should be a starter.
Yeah,
But you can't say will, but should.
but he's a high floor guy.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, high floor guy. The final guy in the class is Zack Carpenter, who is another kind of rough and tough guard out of Moeller, I
Yeah.
believe. So that's a powerhouse in Cincinnati. Another guy who Ed Warner decided, like, this is my guy, and went and pursued and acquired him regardless of what anyone else thought about him. And he's, another kind of generic 3-star, but he's a guy who you have a scout on too.
Yeah, he's another interior guy. Similar to Rumler in that they're both first and foremost maulers, and against good competition, they can pull, but
Yeah.
they finish their blocks. They're physical. They're athletic enough to get by. And I saw them mostly in the run game, of course, as we kind of alluded to earlier, since that's primarily what you see them in. But,
Which is much nicer
hey,
for guards.
That's fine, exactly. For interior linemen,
Yeah.
no big deal. And I think they both will develop into guys who could be starters. I think that's we talked about high floor for
Yeah.
Rumler. I think that we're talking the same thing here as well.
Okay.
Is it a little surprising that a guy who's 310 pounds playing for Cincinnati Moeller is like that under-scouted? Or
I mean,
like,
everybody's
big offensive
under-scouted these
linemen-
days. Like,
And interior guys too.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know how much
does
they
he
camped,
play on the interior in high school?
if I recall correctly, yeah.
So that's a whole different ball of wax
Yeah.
too, because
Yeah.
that's good too. It's kind of like the Cesar Ruiz thing, where he gets to actually play his college position in high school, which is kind of a rarity for big time OL.
And that's definitely going to be the case for Rumler.
Yeah.
As far as, technique refinement goes. He's going to be ahead of other guys
Right.
on the interior.
You mean Carpenter?
Well,
Do you mean?
no, I
mean
meant
both of
Rumler.
them?
I was going back for
So they both played guard exclusively.
I'm going to look up Carpenter right now.
Okay, that's fine.
Yeah.
So that's the offensive class. You kind of maybe wanted a second running back, but I feel like that's a minor nitpick. You didn't have like the all-conquering 5-star quarterback. You do have a good guy who can project, and you don't have, maybe a second tight end who projects as an inline guy. But other than that, you have a 6-man OL class with 4 4-stars, and it's a Warner-approved OL class, and it's seemingly upward really mobile with a couple of guys like Barnhart and Trente Jones. So, A- there.
Mm-hmm.
A+ for Charbonnet, although he is ranked too high for my taste now for superstitious reasons.
Yeah, exactly.
And then once you get Cornelius Johnson, like the rest of the wide receiver concern is like, do they have too many slot receivers? Answer, probably yes. But
Positional versatility.
Yeah, you just talked about running back, too. That's
and if you know anything about me, is if there is a 5'8" guy who can dance, I am all about him. So I feel like Giles Jackson could be that man.
He could.
George Johnson could be that man. Mike Sainristil could be that man. Just got to learn your cool frat dances, and we will all fall in love with you. All right, we're going to take a break, come back, talk about the defense, possibly with Steve Lorenz, but maybe not. No promises.
Let me just tell you a couple things to keep in your mind while you're out there. When we take the field, we're going to win. We've got big goals. We've got big ideas. We've got to win this game, and there is no game on the remainder of our schedule more important than the one you're going down to the tunnel to play today. Now let's go.
Underground Printing is proud to present the Bow Store. Visit us at our new location at 333 South Main or online at www.bow.team.
It's painless, it's online, it's group ordering made easy for your next custom printed apparel order. Pogo from Underground Printing takes the aggravation out of custom printing for a group. Whether you're selling shirts for a fundraiser, organizing a large event, or trying to collect sizes and payment for a family reunion, Underground Printing is here to help. Save time and hassle every step of the way with our easy-to-use site. No more guessing what to order, chasing people down to pay, or wasting time trying to sort out who needs what. We'll set it up and you can just sit back and relax. We can even take care of individual shipping. To learn more about Pogo, visit us at any of our convenient locations or at pogo.undergroundshirts.com.
In southeastern Michigan, the yearly cost for a nursing home averages $90,000. It doesn't have to, though. Reed McCarthy founded Ann Arbor Elder Law after handling a tricky situation for his own family. Years of experience later, his boutique firm works with clients across southeast Michigan, dealing with Medicaid planning, long-term care, and tax, disability, and family law, not to mention family dynamics. If you have a family member who may need that level of care, or if you're ready to start your own estate plan, Reed can give you a plan for the future. Visit AnnArborElderLaw.com or call 734-945-9693. That's 734-945-9693.
The places you'll go may seem far from Ann Arbor. From San Francisco to St. Louis to Shanghai. But as members of the Alumni Association, we're never far. Because Michigan is more than a place. It's a mindset that connects us. For those who leave Michigan, but for whom Michigan never leaves, this is where you belong. The Alumni Association of the University of Michigan. Join today at umalumni.com.
Are you planning a business trip, a Michigan reunion, or a revenge tour in Ann Arbor and don't want to be stuck out by I-94? Look no further than the Residence Inn Ann Arbor downtown. Positioned at the corner of Huron and Ashley, the hotel is just a block from Main Street and a short walk to Michigan Stadium and Central Campus with all the amenities you expect. Also, we podcast here most Sunday mornings, so if you let us know you're coming, we'll let you put a shout out on the pod. That's the Residence Inn Ann Arbor downtown.
To Beer Talk 4.10. Dave's here now. He's got a wispy goatee. That's our Beer Talk. I'm sorry, Dave. It's true. All right. Dave has promised to try to grow a more manly beard. Anyway, we're talking about Michigan's recruiting class. The 2019 early signing day has transpired in 2018, as it does. We're now on the defensive side of the ball. Do we have Steve Lorenz?
I'm here, guys. Can you hear me?
Oh, my God. It is a miracle. How are you doing, Steve? Yes, you have strangled many kittens and are no longer eligible to eat lantana hummus. Seth, how you doing? We have completed our offensive takes, but if you had anything like that you wanted to get off your chest about particular players, I know you were a big fan of George Johnson III.
Yes, he's I think I refer to him as guy who will outdo his recruiting ranking guy for this cycle. Following, I think I had Chris Evans, Kwity Paye, Andrew Stuber, and then Michael Barrett, who is kind of yet to be determined, I assume, there. But love George Johnson. Actually, I think the offensive side of the ball, if from my standpoint, a lot more exciting this year than the defensive side of the ball. Not that the defensive side of the ball is not exciting, but I think the wide receiver group they brought in, especially now if they're calling Sainra still a wide receiver, I think Michigan hit the jackpot there. I think all 5 of those guys are capable of making an impact. I think Quintel Kent gets kind of slept on a little bit. He's not the juju bug, stat guy like a Giles Jackson type, and he's not the outside guy or per se the classic outside guy like Cornelius Johnson is. But I think Kent's a guy who Michigan saw live or evaluated live, loved him, and is a guy who had a huge senior year at Lakewood St. Edward. Is a guy that was really uncoverable for a lot of the season against some really good teams in the state of Ohio. So I think he's a guy that maybe getting slept on a little bit, even though I think he ended up as an 87 for us. So I think both those guys, and again, I mean, like I said, Sainra still and Jackson are 2 explosive athletes, kind of guys that Michigan doesn't really have many of on their roster. I know many, myself included, just want to see how Michigan uses them because now they have them. And then beating Penn State for Cornelius Johnson was really big too. I think his senior film really, really jumps out. Was a guy that our guys were really looking for at the opening. They loved him, but then the change in his ranking never really ended up reflecting that, in my opinion. So, but still, 4-star guy, in our top 247. So I thought that was big. And then obviously the offensive line was huge. Not all those guys are ranked high, but they beat good programs for every single one of those guys, including Rumler, who Michigan kind of had to hold off Ohio State for a little bit there after Drevno left and Warner was hired. So I think those are the 2 big takeaways. Charbonnet, the alpha there, was 1,000% the number 1 running back on their board. They think they're getting the best running back in the country, both on and off the field. They love him as a fit in the locker room and just in the community. So I think they got really, in their opinion, and probably in our opinion by the end of the process, a 5-star guy in that regard.
Don't say that.
Sorry. Yeah, sorry.
No.
Sorry. I forgot to preface with an apology on that, but yeah, offensive side of the ball, really, really like what they did. Like Eric All too at tight end. A guy that plays in an offense that they never throw the ball, didn't really have a quarterback who could throw the ball. So really a guy who didn't really have a ton of film out there as far as what he could do. He tore it up at Michigan's camp over the summer, immediately flew up the board as a top guy for them, so they pushed and beat Iowa, Wisconsin there, 2 schools that obviously know a little bit about the tight end position. So, I think if you're a Michigan fan, you got to be excited about what they're bringing in on the offensive side of the ball. I don't really think there's any other way to look at it.
And did someone say that Trent Jones is the better offensive tackle on his team?
There are people so the day he committed to Michigan, I got a message from...
Is it Trent or is it Trente?
It's Trent, I think.
Trent.
Oh. I don't know.
What is the E even for? Never mind.
I don't know.
There is only one ace.
But got a message from a good Georgia contact that said, that I think that Jones is going to end up being a better college player than Wanya Morris, which we'll see, because, you can see it with Morris, too. That's the thing. But I know in talking to Jones himself, their offensive linemen are graded week in and week out. I believe he finished the season as the highest graded lineman on his team. So, and I believe that all 5 of their starting linemen are D1, like maybe Power 5 guys, if I remember right. I feel like Grayson's got 5. They definitely have 5 D1 guys up front, which is crazy. But I think they were all Power 5 too. So he's playing alongside a lot of really good players, and is a standout guy in his program's mind. And Clemson made a run there too. I think Auburn and Florida had offered. A&M, I want to say, was in there as well. But Clemson tried to make a pretty strong run at him actually after he committed to Michigan, and he's pretty much obviously said no. And same deal with they beat Clemson head to head for Carpenter. Jack Stewart had Auburn and Texas A&M. I want to say he visited Texas A&M before he committed to Michigan. So they beat some big time programs for even the lower rated guys in their list. So, and then you get 6 of them. I don't think we'll see a repeat of 2013 with this group. If you do, that's not good. Because that to me is really probably the single biggest factor in why they struggled, for the up front for as long as they did. That class and its inability to produce or even produce a starter hamstrung the heck out of them for at least 2 or 3 seasons there.
Well, the nicest thing about this class is Michigan has 4 starters returning on the offensive line. They're probably going to put Stuber in at right tackle. All these guys get to redshirt, which you could.
Yeah, if one of those guys comes out and wins a job, it means that he must have been pretty dang good. Right. I mean, that's and I think that's another really important thing because you guys know, I mean, they've had to force guys into spots when they maybe weren't ready for it, and that, like I said, that goes back to 13. I think when you got guys that were playing too early because some of the older guys on the roster weren't producing or weren't on the roster anymore or whatever. So I agree. I mean, even a guy like Rumler, who I think in a lot of instances would be a year 1 guy, I don't think there's any hurry there. And that's something, like you haven't really had the benefit of that for a long time.
No, the entire interior line didn't get the redshirt.
Right.
Which is insane.
Yep.
Crazy. All right, moving on to the defensive end. The defensive side, we're going to hit defensive end first. David Ojabo is one of those guys who we mentioned in the other segment as one of the big risers for this class. Still very much ranked on his potential, but that potential is through the roof.
So this is I'm interested to see how his career. They're not built quite the same, but I am interested to see how his career pans out compared to Zach Harrison, because Harrison was also, I think, ranked really highly on his potential. Ojabo, who will enroll early, which I don't know how much that means because, again, I don't think he's a year 1 guy unless he comes a really long way in a short amount of time. But it's a guy who had all the athletic traits, hasn't played football that long. He's kind of one of those guys. Michigan's been recruiting those types of guys, haven't played football they're not born and bred on a football field. I mean, he's a guy who's still getting used to the game, figuring it out, but again, was another guy that completely blew them away at camp when he came in. I mean, he was already a guy they wanted at that point, but then after his performance in camp, I mean, he was a sort of a must-get type guy. So interested to see how those 2 careers go. I think there's a real good chance both of them are really good players, but Harrison obviously ranked like 3rd or 4th overall. Ojabo, I believe we have him somewhere around 200 overall. So I'm kind of interested to see because they're both very raw specimens who are super, super athletic, but have a ton of potential.
Gabe Newberg is the other defensive end in the class, if you consider Mike Morris a tackle, which I might. And he's one of the lower ranked guys in the class. Adam, you actually got a full game scout on him as well.
Yeah, unfortunately he was injured, but he played through it. Yeah, he did. I was relatively impressed with what he was able to do. He's not maybe the quickest guy off the ball, but I think he's going to be fairly sound technique-wise.
Sure.
And he seems like a guy that with a redshirt year
more of an
could
anchor.
Be. Yeah, he's going to be a rotation guy at some point.
Okay.
And that's so Bill Green, our Ohio guy who's been covering kids in Ohio forever, did kind of throw a Chase Winovich comparison out there.
Really?
I'm not sure, because I agree with Adam. I mean, the thing with Chase is Chase kind of grew into what he became. I mean, he was a quarterback / skinny linebacker when he was in high school. But I do see some resemblance there as far as I know he's known as kind of a work ethic guy. I believe he wrestles too, which is always something you like from a guy at defensive end because of the angles and the ability to use your body when engaging with somebody across from you type deal. So and again, Say what you will, but he was a guy that Michigan State really wanted early in the process. I mean, he was 100% crystal ball to Michigan State before Michigan offered. I think Michigan State's always had a pretty good track record in finding really productive guys at defensive end. So there's always that little thing that you can maybe hang your hat on too. Is this a guy who, if he was signing with Michigan State, we'd probably be hearing about him in 2 or 3 years? So in that regard, again, a lifelong Michigan fan, knows the stakes, knows what goes into what they need to do in November specifically. I think is a guy that the other thing about him too, a big Al Washington recruit. I think Washington kind of stumped for this one, like really, really big time when he first got hired. I want to say when he was at Cincinnati, it was one of Newberg's first scholarship offers he got was from Cincinnati and Al Washington. And when Al Washington came to Michigan, I think he kind of stood on the table to make a move there with Newberg, and and then the recruitment was pretty much over when they offered. So I agree with Adam. I think he's at least a rotation guy. Can he be more? I think he's capable. Obviously, I think at this point on paper, I think all these guys are capable, but he's definitely got some assets to him that I think that give him a shot.
The aforementioned Mike Morris flipped from a Florida State commit that might have been a little bit of a processing. A guy who some people thought might be more of an offensive lineman, clearly won't be unless some weird things happen with the OL class. And on defense kind of projects as a Wormley type where he might bounce between anchor and 3-tech. Kind of a 3.5-star guy with not is like another guy who might be a couple years down the road emerges as a contributor, might be a starter as a upperclassman.
I mean, for my money, I think Morris is the ultimate wild card in this class. I don't really know what to expect there. I do agree. I think his flip from Florida State was not. Florida State was able to move on there, I guess would be the best way to put it. I think that they were okay with that for whatever reason. The thing is, he had a really good early offer sheet. I think he had Oklahoma, Oregon. I want to say.
Really early in his recruitment, he was like a guy who was being looked at as a potential 5-star.
Right, yes. So they've got a couple guys in this class. I think Anthony Solomon was pretty similar as well, as a guy who started out really highly ranked, fell off a little bit. Like I said, I think, and I agree with you fully that I think he's an inside guy all the way down the road in some capacity. But to me, he is, of any guy that they signed today, I think he's the one I'm really interested to see how that pans out. And I don't mean that like in a negative, like that I'm like pessimistic or anything like that. Because again, he's another guy that, I think he's got the bloodlines too. I want to say his dad played.
His dad played at Florida State.
Yeah, and so he's got bloodlines there, and a lot of times those guys pan out. But for my money, I mean, he's the biggest mystery of this class as far as like, could he end up being maybe a guy that surprises people? And he's probably the least talked about guy in the class too that I can think of, because you go lower on the rung, you got a guy like Pesic Hickson who people want to talk about because he came out of nowhere again, and then you obviously have the higher ranked guys. He's kind of in that guy like in the middle of the rankings within their class that nobody's really talked a lot about. So he's one I'm really interested to see where that one goes down the road.
Chris Hinton out of Atlanta started the cycle as a 5-star. Had a bit of a drop as the cycle went on. He's now, I think, 42nd on the composite.
Yeah, something like that.
Slight concern because guys who drop like that, as we mentioned fairly often, sometimes don't drop quite enough. And I think part of this is maybe because Hinton is now expecting to be a defensive tackle. He was ranked as a defensive end. He has this season where he's not the peak edge rusher that you want for like that 5-star end because he's maybe not playing in the right spot.
Yeah, I think he also kind of fell victim to the didn't go to camps guy thing.
Sure.
I don't know if they ever got a look at him after he was about a sophomore. If they ever got a look at him in the t-shirt shorts setting. He'll be at the Army, it's not the Army game anymore, the Adidas All-America game. I'm trying to remember what they call it now.
That has to be like the worst marketing decision of all time.
Yeah, I don't know what the deal. I mean, because 24/7, we're still the affiliate for it. I can't remember I don't know if the Army just didn't re-up or what happened there. But yeah, it went from being the Army All-American game to like I think it's just called like the All-America game presented by Adidas or something like that. So, but Chris is playing in that game, so I think he's one of a couple guys in the class I think that by the time we make our final rankings in February, they'll get a really good idea and a real good feel for what kind of prospect he is, at least coming into Michigan. And again, I mean, if he goes out and struggles or goes in and dominates in San Antonio, I don't, what does that mean for his career at Michigan? I don't know. But I mean, strictly as far as where his ranking is right now compared to where it was at the beginning, I think it's mostly because he wasn't really a camp guy. And I think we'll get a lot more answers about at least how our analysts feel about him in San Antonio. But, I mean, he's a guy that Georgia still would have taken. They tried. They're still recruiting Miles, his younger brother, who will obviously be a top target for Michigan in 2020 at offensive tackle. When they get Miles on campus, and Chris went with him to one game, and Georgia was still trying to work on him. But really, it's like I wrote yesterday. I don't know if it was today. I don't remember. I've written a lot lately, but a guy that if he had waited and then decided today we'd be talking about how huge of a recruiting win it was for them, but instead he committed like a year and a half ago, stayed solid all the way throughout, and nobody really wants to talk about it. So, for me, he's one of the bigger pieces of this class, obviously, not just because of his ranking, but he's again another great fit on and off the field for them. Those are the guys they feel like they can win with, and was a guy again who had a national offer sheet.
His junior tape is still great. Like when he
Yep.
committed, he was a 5-star and he looked like it. And they were playing him at defensive end and tackle, and he was just unblockable at a high level in Georgia.
Yeah, no, I mean I agree. I still think he's a borderline 5-star guy, and I do also think as long as if he comes into Ann Arbor in shape in June. Is a guy, with what happened with Solomon, I think he's a guy that's going to have an opportunity. At the very least, he'll get a chance to compete and see if he is a guy that can play right away next year, because they're between him and Mazi Smith. I think those two guys are all of a sudden potentially pretty important guys in this cycle.
Speaking of Mazi Smith.
Great pickup. Again, another guy that was committed so long ago, nobody really talks about how nice of a recruiting win it was. They beat Notre Dame head-to-head there. A guy I think who, again, is rated properly, but I think is a potential has more upside than where he's at. A guy that I know Alan Trieu has seen him live multiple times. I think the biggest thing with Mazi was just consistency. Would dominate against really, really good opponents. Maybe not so much against lesser teams for whatever reason. I know East Kentwood has... If Fincher plays both ways for them, they have 3 or 4 guys that are deep Power 5, 4-star guys on their line on both sides of the ball. So again, another guy surrounded by a bunch of talent up front for him. So, but again, like I said, he's enrolling and signing and enrolling. He's already signed, obviously, but he's enrolling early as well. And with that in mind, I mean, I think he's going to come in and immediately have an opportunity to show whether or not he's a guy that can play right away. I think we'll know by the end of spring ball, if he's a guy they think can be a year one guy or not. So, and there is that need there.
And Adam, did you catch him at his peak or at his trough?
Both.
Okay.
But that's the nice thing about him being local is that we saw him as a junior and we saw him as a senior.
Sure.
And I thought he took a huge step forward as a senior. You could see flashes of the athleticism as a junior, but the game that David taped for us as a senior, not only was the athleticism there, but I thought the technique was refined. The motor maybe was a little bit better, the every play effort.
Sure.
And, I mean, right now we know he has the size and the strength to be a contributor next year. I wasn't sure about technique, but after watching the senior tape that we have, kind of assuage any fears there.
Sure.
Yeah, Adam's spot on. I mean, physically, there's no doubt, he's there. And I think it'll come down to hands and the technique type stuff for him. But again, big addition. And like I said, really kind of quietly, one of the really more important guys in this class overall individually, given with how thin they appear to be in the middle going into next year.
Yeah, he has a tremendous opportunity, and he's so fast off the ball.
Yep.
Moving on to the Viper spot, Michigan picks up Anthony Solomon, who is a Miami decommit he comes up for like a 5-day unofficial visit over the summer. And I was like, okay, that guy's going to go to Michigan. He commits to Miami, perhaps just because he wanted to join the greatest decommit class of all time in college football. But Solomon, you pop in the tape on Solomon, and it's like, yeah, that's a Viper. Like, he's aggressive. He's a hitter. He's playing middle linebacker, but he looks like a safety. And I was a little bit concerned when I was like, all right, well, this guy looks to be like a safety. And then I was reading a 24/7 article where it's like, yeah, Don Brown likes me as a Viper. And I was like, okay, that makes 100% sense.
Yeah, and he's another guy. You talk about Mazi Smith taking a leap in his senior film. I think Solomon was a guy that really his senior film was a lot better than his junior film too. Really plays well in space, which is why Michigan kind of circled back there. And yeah, I mean, an aside, a pretty tough day for Miami. They missed out on pretty much every top guy they've been after so far. And then their star quarterback commit from last cycle decides to transfer as well, which apparently that came out of nowhere. So it's been a horrible day for Miami. And again, linebacker was a position in need for them, so losing Solomon isn't really something that they were too thrilled about as well. And Solomon, yeah, he's definitely got to put on a little bit of weight. I think that's kind of been the common theme there with him, is he's a little undersized. But again, given, like you said, he'll be playing the Viper spot. And he's a guy that, like I said, plays well. And again, played at a huge program. Played in high-quality competition every week. And was a guy, I think, we were going back to Mike Morris. Solomon was another guy that was ranked really, really high at the beginning of the process. He had accumulated a ton of offers, had a lot of big schools after him early. Then things kind of, I feel like, cooled off a little bit after his junior year. I think his junior year film was okay, but not spectacular. And now I think he's kind of settled into about where I think he is. I think the composite has him at about 194 overall. I think that's fair. I think he's a good fit in Michigan's defense. And I think he's a guy that maybe is going to get slept on a little bit because of his fall. Because we have him as a 3-star. I think he's a little bit better than that. And again, kind of another one of those, even though it just happened, kind of another one of those quieter wins for them a guy and at a position that I think they wanted to solidify some depth at in this cycle.
Well, to me, like, Solomon just didn't really grow very much after his sophomore year. And
yep.
He's saying he's up to like 200 now, but like he's playing at a sub 200 as a middle linebacker. So there's going to be a lot of fit concerns for a lot of teams like that. Michigan is emphatically not one of those programs. Michigan is like, we have a spot for you. Oh boy, do we!
So pretty much, and that's that's one of the pitfalls, because I'm not a huge proponent necessarily of like ranking guys so early, right? I mean, because that's what, like you said, that's the biggest thing is what you said, is that some of these guys physically develop quicker than other guys, and so you get these guys that already look like beasts when they're sophomores, when you realize that they may have maxed out too, and same reason why I feel like high school lineman who's like guard, who's like 325 and just bulldozing people at these camps doesn't always turn into stud at college, because everyone else is still growing and he's already kind of where he's going to be, and then it's not as easy when you're playing, Big Ten, SEC or ACC football or whatever. So yeah, I agree. But yeah, and also, yeah, Michigan's a great fit for him. I think Miami would have been a good fit for him too. I don't know if they're going to play the same defense without Manny Diaz there anymore or not, but he'd have been a decent fit for them too. But again, yeah, I think Michigan may be an even better fit with what Don Brown wants to do.
The other Viper in the class is Joey Velasquez, who is kind of a sleeper out of Ohio who might play baseball. I don't know how much of a threat that is. He's
yeah, I don't think so.
Okay, that's good to know. I mean, he's a guy who didn't really have a whole lot of recruiting hype, but again, Michigan has this Viper spot, which is a little bit different than a lot of programs are what they're looking for in their linebacking core.
Yeah, Joey is jacked. He's huge. Like he's the muscular guy in the class. Like if you've ever seen any of those, what's the phrase? The OMG shirtless guy. Yeah, that's him in a nutshell. Yeah. No. So I think my picture's still Lloyd Brady actually. If I signed on.
Deep cut.
But he is the OMG shirtless of this class for sure. Physically, he's all the way there. I think for him, and I know he knows this, he's mentioned it, working on getting better in coverage is going to be a really, really big thing for him early on. I think that's where he's really going to have to put in a lot of work and a lot of effort. Michigan loves him. Again, another guy, I think they saw him live in some capacity, whether it was a camp, satellite, or whatever. I think they saw him live 3 times before they decided to extend the offer. And again, I mean, the Viper spot is a spot they can promote and they can push on the recruiting trail, and they can find a guy. You know, and so my philosophy there is, like, if they offer a guy, or let's just say in this instance, because he didn't have many offers, if they take a shot on a guy like that, then I usually feel pretty good about his chances of doing something, especially, again, with Brown's track record at the spot. I think it's a safe bet that Joey will turn into something. I don't think the baseball thing is going to become like a big yeah, I don't think it's going to become a big thing. I'd be surprised. I mean, that's based on what he's told me multiple times. Okay. But again, I don't know if he comes out this spring and destroys. I don't know. I mean, he's a legit baseball prospect. I just don't know if it's something that he's going to wait to do, or if he's like that legit to where I don't know if he's going to be signing like an MLB deal or anything anytime soon. So, but yeah, another Ohio kid. Really was a guy that was really putting the recruiting cap on with Harrison too. Really tight. He's really tight with Harrison, and a guy that is pretty bent on wanting to beat Ohio State. I mean, I think he was on the radio with Sam this morning, talked about it specifically. Kind of a guy I think that's really going to be a driver for them as far as, I mean, his philosophy, from what I've been told from him and just listening to him talk, is that that's a 365-day a year thought for him.
I think it's worth
noting. Maybe that can.
Well, yeah. He was committed to Ohio State as a baseball player, right?
That's right. Yes.
Yeah. Right. So, I mean, he's now on the other side of it, I guess. I don't know if he was.
And you scouted Velasquez.
Yeah, we saw him. David went and got film on him. Thanks, David. I completely agree with Steve. He's an effort guy. I think he'll develop into something by way of that. He's definitely got athleticism, but coverage and run support are areas to improve. He's just a guy that I think could use a redshirt year, and then he's maybe a guy who could contribute as an upperclassman.
So Solomon is pretty definitely a Viper all the way. Is Velasquez a guy who you could see maybe moving inside, or?
I could.
Yeah,
he's huge.
Yeah,
I mean, he's more muscular than what their Vipers have been, right? I mean, granted, Hudson's jacked, but Joey's like a different than Hudson. It's hard to explain, but maybe Adam would.
No, he looks like a middle linebacker as opposed to
when I looked at his film, I thought I was looking at more of even a Jake Ryan than a Viper.
Mm-hmm.
So it felt to me like he might be like the class's Josh Uche or something like that, where he was very good going forward vertically. He was a big hitter. He was a good rusher.
Yeah, and like Uche, a guy that maybe in year 3, right? Not immediately necessarily, but a guy, give him a couple years because he's got that athleticism. Obviously, they love the multi-sport guys. I mean, I know that's kind of a thing now for everybody, but baseball, I think, is what really put him on their radar to begin with, actually. So,
moving inside, this guy is the most anonymous recruit in the class, Charles Thomas, who I honestly could not tell you anything about. I committed like 2 years ago. I haven't thought about him since. I wrote his name down. I was like, oh, right, that guy.
Wasn't he IMG?
He was at IMG, but then he transferred away.
He went back home again to Connecticut.
So
no, he's from Georgia, actually, originally.
Right.
Yeah.
So what's up with Charles Thomas?
So I think he's the longest tenured commit of the class. I'm like pretty sure on that one.
It's him or Rumler.
Yeah.
I'm
pretty sure it's Thomas was first.
So he was a mystery for us for a long time too. After he committed, actually, then come to find out, I mean, from what I was told, and I know this is where it's like kind of iffy or whatever. But when he was at IMG, I mean, we were told that the IMG staff like loved his game and loved his ability, and that he was they thought he was one of the best guys on their roster. And because you guys kind of know the history with Michigan getting really, really early verbals. Sometimes they don't always pan out, and then things were kind of quiet there for a long time. But from what I've been told and what I know, Michigan was fully set on him the entire process. There was never any wavering or any thought to him looking around or anything like that. So probably a guy that's going to play in the middle. He's not as fast as Devin Bush, but nobody really is. But as a guy I think is probably quicker than what he's given credit for. I've seen scouting reports that have mentioned him not being, too decisive or quick. That's a little bit of a weakness. I don't necessarily agree with that. And again, another guy, I think his latter half of his junior year film going into senior year, I think was pretty solid stuff. So, but honestly, yeah, Brian, I mean, even though he's been committed this long, he's one of the guys I definitely know the least about in the class. Like, I do know though that Michigan never wavered on him. It was never a deal where he was not going to be a guy that was going to get recruited over or anything like that. Like, they were set on him the entire time.
Well, he's kind of, he's kind of this anonymous 3-star in the class, but his final rank is 455. So like that's the range where I'm like, okay, he's a 3.5 star. Yeah. So I mean, it's not like, we're not talking about a guy from the boonies and the quadruple digits or anything. This is a very solid prospect who maybe got lost in the shuffle a little bit.
I really like this film.
And one school, and there's about 10 schools out there that I always take notice that if this school offers a guy, that to me that means that they're pretty good. And the Clemson offered Thomas pretty early in the process. And the only reason I say that is because Clemson's not one of those schools that throws out a ton of offers. And they definitely don't throw out a ton of offers really that early.
Yeah.
So that one was always noteworthy to me when I know that Clemson had offered him a scholarship. I thought, okay, this guy's got to be at least a pretty solid linebacker because they're not the type of school that's throwing out, 300 quote offers or whatever at a bunch of guys. Right. Like they're pretty judicious in who they offer. And so for them to have offered him as early as they did, and before he even committed to Michigan, I believe, I thought was pretty significant at the time. And then again, knowing that Michigan was in with him the whole way, that there was never any wavering, I think adds up to a guy that obviously they feel like. I mean, that's it. I mean, we've talked about their backers, and I thought it was a spot that they only really took McGrone last year for all intents and purposes. I think it was a position that maybe there was a little bit of need, at least I would think, and so. Just by deducing the little deduction there, I feel like that they must feel like they have a guy with him. So, really, one of the guys. I mean, there's guys going forward up until June when they enroll that we're going to look to learn a little bit more about, and he's definitely one of them.
The other guy I filed here completely arbitrarily is athlete Amari Pesek-Hickson, who is the second straight year Michigan has grabbed just this random guy out of Kansas City that nobody has offered at all. And
was he actually a Missouri State basketball committee?
No, he was not. But he got offered, and it was like, okay, what? Bell works out okay. But so he's 6'3", he's 210. He could play safety. He might be a wide receiver. He might be a Viper. But I'm saying that you put, if he's 210 already, you're going to put 25 pounds on him, and he's going to be a linebacker.
I agree. I think you're right. I think he is a linebacker. I didn't include him in my safety right up today. I put him as athlete, but I would project him to linebacker as things stand because, I he's definitely going to put on some weight. Again, this is a guy they recruited fully, I believe, based off of his athleticism. And then, again, another guy that's barely played any football in his life. Not saying he hasn't played any football, but he's not as experienced and didn't grow up around the game. Like Bell, I think he's a basketball player by trade. I mean, there's actually kind of a lot in common between the two of them, even remove geography. Just the way Michigan went about finding, offering, and recruiting the guy. It's almost the same way. And Pesek-Hickson, really good basketball player. Again, another comparison to Ronnie Bell. You can look up his basketball highlights where he's throwing dunks down. I mean, that's honestly, if you guys remember, I mean, that's really what the few people who were excited about Ronnie Bell, who are all of which the others appear to be on their way to being wrong at this point, it was basketball highlights that really got people pumped up about what Ronnie Bell might bring to the table because he's like a little bit of a shorter guy throwing down like easy dunks in big games, and you can do the same and look it up with Pesek-Hickson the same way. Looks like a really good basketball player, and is a guy I think again they're recruiting based off of his athletic ability, and is a guy that they think they can turn into something, and that's something I'm kind of learning with Don Brown is like they'll take a guy because they have a lot of faith in their ability to coach a guy up and turn him into something, and Uche's really been the best example of a guy. Granted, Uche had Auburn and Florida, had a few others, but that's because he played in Miami, at Columbus High School, which is one of the bigger programs down there. But they'll find a guy. They'll find a guy anywhere with that type of profile.
Well, I mean, you look at Kwity Paye, you look at Devin Gill, maybe Josh Metellus even. So
turn over any rock, and if a guy has the right kind of profile that they're looking for, they'll take a chance on him. And again, I mean, you have to admit, I mean, there's some risk, in taking a guy that maybe hasn't played a ton of football, didn't really have any offers. I mean, I was surprised that the last, neither Kansas nor Kansas State's last staffs, neither of them really even gave him a strong look, and so and it's those programs need something, they need help, and So yeah, he's another one really interesting. But I agree. If I had to throw him into a position, I'd definitely throw him in a backer.
All right, DJ Turner, the second. I always love guys who are the second. That's junior's all right, but the second, excellent. So he was another guy who Michigan targeted early in the process. Kind of another 3.5-star guy without a huge offer list, but Michigan seemed very happy to take his commitment. There was no waiver there, and he was just locked in from that point.
Yeah, he's like Jamon Green from last year. I assume almost the exact same thing. I think they even have the same rating, 88. A guy that, Michigan offered. He was one of the first corners they offered in the cycle. He was immediately a top target for them. They out-recruited everybody else and got him, and then he stayed solid. And then had a really good senior year at IMG. I know John Garcia, who I don't know what his official title is. He does a lot of video work for us, but he also travels all over the South and covers guys. Saw Turner live this year, loved him. I think he might have been the best DB on IMG's roster this year. And again, but I still consider him a Georgia guy. Michigan's really their efforts in Georgia really are continuing to pay off. And I think Turner, he still had a really good offer sheet. I'm not sure. He had a final 10 that had some really big names in it. I wasn't 100% sure if he was a take for all 10 of those programs, because I think Bama was in there, Georgia, Clemson. I'm not sure he was a take for all those schools, but I do know there were schools like Notre Dame, Auburn. I want to say Florida was another one that really, really liked him. So again, Michigan beating some big time programs for some of these guys that might not be ranked as high as fans would like them to be.
The other corner in this class is also a Georgia guy. Jalen Perry was a Georgia commit. Might have been processed a little bit.
Yeah, I think that's fair to say.
But he's also a top 200 guy who's a kind of a quarterback safety hybrid who could end up at either spot. Once he decided to open up his recruitment, he was pretty locked in on Michigan. But he's a guy who Georgia at least wanted in their class for a long period of time, and he had a lot of good other SEC offers.
Yeah, and Michigan this is another guy, I think, and this one was a little quieter, obviously, because he'd been committed to Georgia for so long, because he committed to them pretty early, I want to say. A guy that Michigan stayed on. I think South Carolina was the other school that was really a factor, especially after he decommitted from Georgia. But Michigan got him up to campus twice. They got him up once on an unofficial. I believe the unofficial was for Penn State, and pretty much sealed the deal from that point on, to my knowledge. And yeah, a little bit longer than Turner. And again, I mean, it's if Georgia moves on from a guy, it's not like, I wouldn't ever look at that as like a terrible sign, because it's Georgia, and they always randomly win a bunch of recruiting races at the end of the day somehow anyway. So with some higher ranked guys. So I think they did it a couple times today actually. So so that's the way it goes there. I wouldn't look at that as like a huge knock or a big negative or anything on Perry's game. And he's going to enroll early as well. And with Michigan, we'll see what happens with David Long and Lavert Hill. But there's a good chance that that the competition at cornerback is going to be really, really big heading into next year. And so with him getting on there early, who knows? I know they haven't had a true freshman really come in and start anytime recently, but I think this is going to be one of the more open competitions in recent memory at that position. So I think he'll have a shot.
Another thing about him is that he fits the mold of what Don Brown wants right now as far as taller corners with superior athleticism. So he's a guy who's 6'1", should be able to cover, taller, bigger red zone type threat wide receivers as well as down the field.
He's not like a 6'3" leap man like all the guys they took last year, but
Yeah.
He's a little bit of a bigger guy,
yeah. DJ Turner's actually, he doesn't look like a big guy, but his arms are ridiculous.
Yep.
I mean, they always the wingspan. It's what they do. It's like, I gotta show my arms.
Like the Jordan poster.
Yeah. All right, moving on to safety. We saved the best for last. Also, Quentin Johnson, but
Hey, I like Quentin Johnson.
I like Quentin Johnson a lot too. I'm not trying to diss him, but but Dax Hill is on a completely different level. Consensus 5-star. You know, I was talking to Sam earlier in this year when I was like, "Oh, we're gonna get this Dax Hill guy," and it was like, he told me Michigan was really in it, but his concern was that the playing time aspect that you can usually use when you recruit against Bama isn't in play here because Nick Saban was saying to people other than Dax Hill that he was the best safety he had recruited while the coach at Alabama.
Yeah. Yep.
So
he's good.
He's good. That's
Quite.
a good,
Quite good.
It's a good way to put it.
Very professional podcast.
I mean, it's the superlatives in this one are kind of hard to. There's a lot you can say. I mean, for my money, I would expect him to be a starter next year in some capacity. I mean, I think this kid's that good, and you could argue that he's the top-ish prospect that they've had in who knows how long. You know, with Rashawn, I think he's right there with Rashawn and Jabril Peppers as a guy that is a game-changing type recruit. And really, that's the other thing about this class as a whole. Charbonnet and Hill, I think running back and safety were really the two positions where I don't think Michigan had ever really hit like that home run, grand slam type. You know, at receiver they got Peoples-Jones. On the offensive line they've gotten guys. At quarterback they got Milton and McCaffrey were top guys for them. You go up and down the line, and they've gotten like a stud or like the very, very top guy on their board at pretty much every other position except running back and safety, and they 1,000% did it this cycle with those guys. And remove the fact that Hills is supremely talented as he is, he's also exactly what Michigan needs at that safety spot to begin with, as a guy that can do anything there. Just a different level athlete. He'll definitely be a pro as long as he stays healthy, and probably be drafted very highly, barring something crazy. You know,
what was the last Michigan safety to go like in the top 3 rounds of the NFL draft?
Jeez,
Not counting Peppers.
Not counting Peppers. he played linebacker here. So I mean, that's I honestly can't answer that question.
I have no idea.
Yeah.
Yeah.
that's I mean, then that's that's where they're at with this one, and just a heck of a job by Sharon Moore. Obviously, Chris Partridge is, it's kind of a given that he's going to be pretty much in on most of the top guys they're recruiting. I mean, he's just awesome at what he does.
Seth has a database. I overlooked Delano Hill, who was a 3rd rounder.
Oh,
right.
So not that long ago.
Database.
He was so quiet though.
Yeah.
Hill was such an unassuming guy. Like that's kind of he's he was a quiet.
Also, Hill arrived on campus as a 45-year-old man, so I'm not sure if that counts.
Right, that might have been the 3rd round in 1975 or something. It might be the same thing.
He actually looks younger now than when he enrolled. I should go to the Seattle Seahawks roster pictures there, but no, great family, good guys. But another Hill. So you have a different Hill family, and but no, I mean, like I said, there's really not much more you can say. It's just the crown jewel of the class. You kind of. It's not a troll of Alabama because his original flip was like a legit thing, but you kind of put a little bit of egg on Bama's face for whatever that's worth. And perception, reality.
Settle for Ohio State safety.
Yeah. Which I don't know if those were related or not, but that's what I was just going to say. Actually, it's like perception with recruiting. Perception is reality, in a lot of ways. And for Michigan to win this one back, probably opened some eyes with some guys, and in the next couple cycles. I mean, matter of fact, Hill has a teammate in 2020, a top 100 receiver now. That I think because Hill's going to sign and play at Michigan, I think Michigan's going to have a real shot with the kid. So, and whether there's some after effects in some other recruitments or not, I don't know. But I would say it was the biggest story of the day so far in recruiting. I don't know if of one that was any bigger. I mean, he was a top 5 guy. Was everyone that woke up, that didn't know, woke up and thought he was assigned into Alabama, and Michigan comes in and gets him back. And now they're, like I said, they sign.
This has never happened.
No,
it's always like the Travis Johnson. I went to bed at Wolverine and woke up a Seminole thing, or Mike Weber's thing. This never goes the other way.
Yeah, it not for Michigan, because and this was needed, I think, just for the collective emotional
health of the fan base
of a lot of especially when you look at the Zach Harrison race, and this is what I wrote, and I said, because I usually try to not be like, it stinks, guys, sorry, fans, but with Harrison, when you could make a legitimate argument that Urban Meyer retiring actually helped Ohio State beat Michigan in that race, it's hard not to feel like you're snake bitten if you're in Michigan. To imagine that Meyer, who I would say is probably pound for pound was probably the best head coach recruiter in the recruiting rankings era, for him to actually leave a program or to retire and it actually help Ohio State with the one guy that it looks like Michigan's going to pull out of Columbus is misfortune at its worst, from that standpoint.
Well, how many times has Michigan been on the other side where all the parents want to go, please go to Michigan, please go there and get an education, and then we lose that in the end.
Ohio State only has 15 kids in this class right now.
Yeah. Small class.
They've had, and they're going to have a lot of NFL departures. I think that they could take up to 25 if they wanted to, and they're at 15 after this. So, the Zach Harrison thing sucks. Don't get me wrong, but if you're looking at what this has done to Ohio State recruiting, it has hurt it a lot. Michigan is going to have the top class in the Big Ten unless Ohio State pulls some rabbits out of their hats.
Yep.
And that hasn't happened in a long time. So I think this particular thing sucks, but Ohio State having Urban Meyer retire and hiring someone with a resume as thin as Ryan Day is pretty much the best case scenario.
I agree, Brian. I just thought with Harrison is just funny, as from a Michigan fan standpoint but I 1,000% agree. And to be honest with you, I think people are understating, Meyer. Say what you will about the guy, I get it, but the guy was a master recruiter, and he knew and knows that everything is about recruiting. And if you have a better hand, if you can give yourself a better hand than the guy sitting across the table from you, you're always going to give yourself a better chance to win. And he's always been a master at that. I mean, talking about even saying that when he decided to retire, I guarantee you recruiting was in mind when he thought about, okay, this is the right time because it's not going to – it's our best chance to not hurt our standing on the recruiting trail because we just beat Michigan. It's before the early signing period. I just think it was everything he did was calculated from a recruiting standpoint. And we'll see what Ryan Day can do. Ohio State's still going to be supremely talented, but it's not. I don't think anybody is ever going to. It cannot be the exact same as it was when it was under Meyer, because he was so good at understanding the recruiting game, knowing the ins and outs, knowing that everything had to do with recruiting. And so, big picture wise, I fully agree.
All right, we have to get back to Quentin Johnson though.
Okay,
we can't just diss him. To me,
not Dax Hill. A little bit longer.
To me, he's one of the more underrated recruits in this class because he goes to the opening, he puts up a ridiculous spark store, he impresses everybody. He's the exact size you want in a safety. He's got a good offer list, and it's I guess he's kind of a 3.5 star. And I'm like, what does he have to do?
Yeah, his film is much better than a 3.5 star.
Exactly.
It shows.
In my little database thing, he is ranked right next to Delano Hill. So
Delano.
I'm never gonna get that.
Sorry,
right.
It's all right.
He's between Delano Hill and Marcus Ray, with Khaleke Hudson right in the little zone too.
So, what is your Quentin Johnson take, Steve?
I mean, Bama offered him at their camp, right? And that was a camp offer. That wasn't a hey, come visit us offer. That was a we saw you, we're offering you offer. I went back and read about him while we do our capsules and stuff, and he was one of I didn't end up writing on him, but I just went back and looked because, like I said, like you guys said too, I watched his senior film and I'm like, okay, and I remember our guys writing a lot about him this summer, and during the opening, he was a guy that came out and I think it was Barton that literally wrote that he was a riser coming out of the opening, and that they loved his athletic ability. And obviously, the testing, he tested amazingly. I saw a post by our LSU guy with their 2 cornerbacks, Derek Stingley, and they signed somebody else today too, who both are supremely talented guys and that tested really well. I went and looked, and Michigan's guys at safety both tested better. Hill tested better than Stingley, and Johnson tested better than whoever. I can't remember who their second guy was. They got at corner today, but either way, I mean, he's a guy that they pretty much called like a Jabril Light as far as what they think he's capable of on the defensive side of the football. And I know that, again, another guy played at the National Powerhouse program, so he's played against high competition his whole career. And the other thing too, talking to him, it's really the first year that he's played safety full time, and so that it's a deal where I think the best is yet to come for him too. So it's a nice little combination of like, this guy's athletic as hell. He's got good coverage ability. He plays super aggressively, but he's still learning the position. Not a guy that we've got 3 years of safety film on and can say, okay, well, we can see what this guy can do, what he can't do on film. I think there's a lot yet for him to learn. I mean, he's basically said that himself. But yeah, on the defensive side of the ball, he'd be my guy who would outdo his recruiting ranking.
All right.
Because he's at an 88. I think he should be higher for sure. Him and Ojabo, I know we talked about Ojabo. I think those two guys, even though Ojabo's a 4-star, I just think he's a guy that Ojabo's one of those guys that could be a superstar because of why we ranked him where we ranked him. You guys know what I'm saying there. Is that he's a guy. Yeah. He's on the precipice. He just needs to figure it out.
He's a boomer bust guy. So
exactly. And with Johnson, I feel less boomer bust because I think there's a good chance he booms. But I think from being an 88, I think there's a really good shot for him to outdo it. I mean, Michigan gets an A+ at safety this cycle. No, there's no other way you can cut it. They got 2 guys, one of which should make an instant impact, and who knows, if Johnson comes in and can be a guy that can at least push somebody early, and we'll see. But, I mean, just 2 excellent additions there, and one's going to get all the publicity, but the other one is a guy that I don't think anybody should sleep on.
All right, before we let you go, Michigan signs 27 guys. They may have 1, 2, maybe 3 spots left for February. What positions do you think they might target? Are there any names out there that you think that might pop up over the next few weeks?
Well, I think defensive tackle is somewhere they might want to get. They might want one more body there. Yeah. They offered that Devon Ellies out of McDonough in Maryland, which is just outside of Baltimore. I think they're Gilman's main rival, if I remember right. And then was it Jared Harrison Hunt? It was another 3-star guy from New York that they also offered. I believe their better chance right now off the top of my head is with Harrison Hunt, I think. But that's one spot I feel like, and whether that's because of the Solomon transfer or not, I still think that interior line is where they want to maybe take one more guy. Running back is the other spot I'm looking at. Charbonnet, obviously, crown jewel, alpha guy. I still think that they're going to take a strong look at taking a second guy. There was a kid, Kayron Adams, out of Warren Harding, actually, where Manningham, Prescott Burgess played, was a guy that they really liked, was a mid-3-star guy, but I think has some really good senior film. He actually did follow through and sign with Rutgers today.
That was the guy, yeah.
Yep, Adams, yep. Rutgers actually, then Rutgers flipped Michigan State's running back commitment too. Rutgers actually signed 2 pretty good running backs today, to be honest with you. So
we've been saying for a while that if you're a Rutgers commit at running back, then everyone should go for you.
Well, no, that's commit and
yeah.
And complete the trifecta.
Right,
yeah,
so
the
Michigan sent out that offer, and I was like, yes,
go get it.
Yep, the Barkley Taylor trifecta.
Since we did mention the running back Adams flipping to Rutgers, that does cost Michigan State their conference room.
Yes.
So they're out. So Maryland, Ohio State, Illinois, and MSU are no longer at the Residence Inn Ann Arbor downtown. There are only 9 conference rooms left.
Can I just add one other thing?
Man.
Right now, Rutgers is
they lost
above Illinois and Maryland.
Well, they've already lost.
They've already lost their conference rooms.
There you go.
They lost. Illinois beat them for a defensive end today too. I mean, they've had a rough couple signing days.
State is what?
Yeah.
Beat Michigan State, not Rutgers, right?
Yeah, sorry, Michigan State got beat for a DN they got beat out by Illinois. Feels like the last couple signing days have been really, like, I like a lot of the guys that they got in their class, but the actual signing day itself has been like really rough for them. I don't know if you remember, but there was that guy that ended up like got arrested, like the day their signee that got arrested the day before signing day and couldn't sign his letter of intent because he was in jail.
Why would? Oh, I guess if you're in jail.
Yeah.
I mean, normally it's just like whatever.
Yeah, they never ended up sending him a letter, but I'm saying, like I say, he missed his signing day ceremony because he was in jail, and then they had a guy who chose to be a walk-on at Northwestern overtaking a scholarship from Michigan State. Yeah, I mean, they just, again, like I usually like the way they recruit. Don't get me wrong, but the actual signing day itself has just kind of been a little unkind to them the last couple of years. But yeah, so running back, like I said, I think they'll look to take one more. I don't think it's a guarantee. I think they're in a situation now where they're not going to reach just to fill a spot. I think if they find a guy that they like, and I don't know if that's somebody that they've offered already or not. There's nobody off the top of my head that they've offered that didn't sign today that I feel like, hey, maybe they can flip this guy.
Yeah.
But I do think it's not going to be a deal where they're just going to take a guy to take a guy. If they offer a guy, it's because they really think he can be a guy, not, hey, well, Maury Samuels is no longer on the roster. We really need running back depth. We're just going to take a guy, So
yeah, and then the spots where you might find guys who are available late, like kicker or punter or fullback. I mean, Michigan's pretty much full up on those spots right now. So
yeah, I don't see that. I mean, I think like I said, I think defensive interior and running back are the two spots that really jump out to me. They sniffed around on a couple tight ends late. With a kid named Sam Snyder out of Orange Park, Florida, was a guy that they hosted was going to host for an official, but they ended up kind of saying, "Hey, sorry, but I don't think we're going to have the room." And then there was the Darius Robinson kid from Canton that they offered and then never really recruited after they offered him, even though it was like less than a month ago. So there was a little bit of a look at some tight ends, but otherwise, I mean, it feels like, offensive line. I think they're packed there, and at wide receiver, obviously. So there's really no other spot I can see where there's really enough of a need for them to want to go after anybody. Again, that's unless somebody with unforeseen attrition or whatever. I mean, there's always a possibility with some of this stuff, but I don't see anything now besides interior line and running back.
I mean, the one thing I would say is that, okay, they have Charles Thomas, they have Pesek Hickson, who may be a linebacker, but after just one last year, another inside linebacker might be something that they would look at.
If they don't, I think I have to write what are the biggest needs in 2020, and I mean, linebackers at the top of the list already. I can tell you that right now. So, and yeah, I mean, that could be a spot where they look for a guy. I've not gotten that indication that that's the case, but it probably be the next in line behind the two that I was told. Because of what you said. Again, you took McGrone, who probably is going to be on the outside. You need guys, there. So especially, Singleton's gone, right? So,
yeah.
I agree there. It's definitely going to be, I think, their number one need in 2020 for sure.
Any final thoughts on this 2019 early signing day?
I think they filled most of the. I think they did mostly what they wanted to do. I think they had a little bit of bad luck. Like, it seems like Michigan, they're always like right on the verge of doing something crazy, but it never quite. It's like if Jeff Brohm's coaching Louisville right now, then George Karlaftis is signing with Michigan.
What are you doing, Jeff Brom? Come on.
Yeah, and then if with Zach Harrison is that they were so close there too.
Yeah.
So really, it's you take that away. This is still. I just think they continue to hit the 88 through like 90 guys. Really, I think they're finding a lot of really good players in that range. Like like I said, you get Giles Jackson, Sainris Still, George Johnson, like that 86 to like 89 range. I think that they're really finding some really potentially productive players in that range. So that's the one thing for fans who worry about the stars and stuff. Which I get it. When you continue to see Alabama and Clemson and Ohio State winning conference championships, it's obviously has some merit to it. But I do think that Michigan's doing a really, really good job at that mid-level area and then obviously supplementing it with some of the higher rated guys. So, Dax Hill, Charbonnet should be stars for them. I think Charbonnet is a guy that'll play right away next year. Especially your return four starters on the offensive line should be a pretty darn good unit. I think he's a guy that's probably going to be the most physically, not capable. Christian Turner's had a really good, since he's been healthy, hasn't played, but he's been really good. I think he's going to be a factor next year too. But Charbonnet's huge. I mean, he's like a mini Fournette. In that regard, I think they got an instant impact guy, and then with Dax Hill they did too. So, those are my takeaways. Offensive line and wide receiver, I thought they hit home runs at. Safety, obviously. And then, like I said, the other biggest thing is, running back and safety, the two spots that they've not ever really had that grand slam home run at. I think they did both positions.
All right. Thank you very much, Steve. It's a pleasure to talk to you.
No problem, guys. Take care.
Yep. Bye. I was thinking, he was talking about Jamon Green and how he's very similar to DJ Turner. I was hoping that DJ Turner had a twin who was DJ Turner 1. That would be amazing. Actually, DJ Turner 3 would also be pretty good.
Yep.
Because then it's like, what happened to DJ Turner 1? Nobody knows. Anyway, we're going to take a break, come back, and talk about something or other.
Yeah, doing pretty long segments here.
I grew up in a small town of Hazlitt, Michigan, and I witnessed a lot of great people making a lot of poor financial decisions. And I thought to myself, I don't want to be in that position. I don't want to have my retirement at risk. Over the last 17 years, my team has developed and refined our process, which helps people understand what's important to them and what they value most. And because people don't have pensions anymore, we're adding in multiple income streams during retirement. At Peak Wealth Management, our goal is to build long-lasting relationships, and we do that by building trust, by showing our integrity, and letting them know how much we care. And that's one of the most important things we do here at Peak, is understand your goals and help you get there.
You're an MGO blog reader, so you've probably already met Gordon Fall. Yes, the guy who comes to all of our events. Yes, he is named after Gordie Howe. Yes, Wayne Gretzky knows this and says hi, Gordie, whenever they cross paths. Seriously, Gordon has stepped up to sponsor this podcast, so we should tell you what he does. Gordon is a licensed agent with New York Life Insurance. He specializes in holistic policies for individuals with long-term goals and short-term financial situations. He would like to expand that roster now in anticipation of opening his own shop next year, and would rather work with fellow lifelong Michigan obsessives. If you're starting out in your career, growing your family, or beginning to think about retirement, you should talk to Gordon about crafting a plan for you. Visit GordonFall.com to start the conversation. That's GORDON fall.com. If you get in foul trouble in Ann Arbor or Metro Detroit, you want a Michigan man on your bench. Call former prosecutor and now criminal defense attorney Jonathan Paul, the Michigan Law Grad, at 248-924-9458, or visit his website at michiganlawgrad.com. Are you planning a business trip, a Michigan reunion, or a revenge tour in Ann Arbor and don't want to be stuck out by I-94? Look no further than the Residence Inn Ann Arbor downtown. Positioned at the corner of Huron and Ashley, the hotel is just a block from Main Street and a short walk to Michigan Stadium and Central Campus with all the amenities you expect. Also, we podcast here most Sunday mornings, so if you let us know you're coming, we'll let you put a shout out on the pod. That's the Residence Inn Ann Arbor downtown.
Want the perfect game day outfit? Underground Printing has unique, great-fitting apparel and officially licensed apparel from legendary Michigan names like Woodson, Howard, Schembeckler, Ufer, and more. UGP also specializes in custom printed apparel and promotional items for groups, events, and businesses. Whether you need one shirt as a gift or 1,000 shirts for a charity walk, Underground can customize almost anything for groups large or small. To learn more, visit Underground Printing at one of our 3 convenient locations around Ann Arbor or online at undergroundshirts.com.
Oh, well, hi, hey there, hello. Have you got someplace to go?
Well, I've got some time and I would love to take you
equals to my name.
Well, hey, my story sounds the same, but I'll find some way to show you what life's all about.
Well, we could take a walk downtown.
Now let's search for higher ground.
Welcome to Beer Talk 4.10. I'm just going to say that for every podcast from now on.
All right.
So we've
12, by the way. We're Beer Talk 4.12.
Well, no, it's always 4.10. Beer Talk 4.10. We talked with Steve Lorenz about the entirety of the class. Steve has now mercifully been able to go out to dinner with his wife. We're sorry for holding you so long, Steve. But we thought we would kind of run down a lightning round of the class. So gimmicky top 5 style.
You promised us we wouldn't have to do one of these, too.
I promised that. I literally promised that. I'm like, you're not going to have to do this. But I lied. All right, sleeper in the class. Top sleeper.
Quentin Johnson.
Quentin Johnson. All right. Fine. Just
wait.
No, it's fine. No, you want someone else?
/ Charles Thomas.
Remember
Charles I told
Thomas.
you that walking in. I think he's going to turn into something.
All right. Well,
he has very Devin Bush measurables.
Okay.
I'm not saying he's the next Devin Bush because no one closes like him,
sure,
but
yeah.
you know, I think he'll develop. Yeah.
All right. Seth.
They unfortunately figured out the whole defensive end thing that you like Ojabo would be normally, like a low 3-star.
So, most likely to outperform their recruiting ranking. We're not doing my like hard like line between 4 and 3 stars.
Oh, yeah.
Most likely to outperform their recruiting ranking.
I know. Whatever. George Johnson is still ranked really low. So,
he is.
True.
Yeah. So I'm going with George Johnson because he is an athlete.
I'm going to go with Anthony Solomon. I know he's a top 200 player, but I just look at his video, his film. Every scouting report about him is about how he's great in coverage. And then you flip on his tape, and it's like this guy can get after it, too. He's a physical player. So, you know, I think he's a guy who's the heir apparent at Viper, and that's one of the glamour positions on the defense, and that's going to be how it goes. All right, best recruiting story. Just it doesn't have to be Michigan. Just something that happened this year that was the ultimate in recruiting.
That's a good one. Dax Hill's up there.
Dax Hill is up there, yeah.
That's the one for me. I have a big advantage by going first over Seth.
He
I
does.
love this.
Well, except for you have to think of something. Well, I'm still thinking of something.
Fair enough.
Well,
I'm going to go
yeah.
with Dax Hill. Because, you know, also this never happens in Michigan's favor. Like we've
That's
established.
true.
This just never.
It just never
Wait,
happens. No.
Since you took Dax Hill, I'm taking Rutgers stealing a Michigan State running back.
That's a good one.
That's a good one.
That's
I like
a good
that.
one.
Yeah.
I'm going to go with the greatest decommit class of all time at Miami. I keep bringing this up. It is hilarious to me that after Solomon flipped to Michigan, that their decommit class was worth more 24/7 points than their actual class of commits. What's going on? What's going on? I don't know. All right, biggest boomer bust prospect in the class, Adam.
Man, that's probably Ojabo.
Yeah, Ojabo's a good shout. Like, he's a guy who hasn't played very much but has crazy physical upside.
Yeah, I mean, Ojabo was where I was going with that one, too, so.
All right, you can pick the same player. That's okay.
Okay. Sorry, Cade's a good one, too.
Okay.
Because he is I wouldn't say Tate Forcier-esque, but he's kind of in that same Tate Patterson mold.
Right.
And those guys...
Can he sit in a pocket?
Right. But, like, when those guys blow up, you get, like, an Oklahoma quarterback.
That'd be nice.
Yeah.
Mine is Giles Jackson because, I mean, I love his film. He's a really fun player. Michigan has not successfully used a guy like him since Steve Breston. So it's just, you know, he could be the most talented guy in the world and end up at Tuskegee. All right, your favorite guy to project 3 years down the road. Like, maybe he's not going to play this year, maybe he's not going to play this year, but you're excited about his potential after he develops. Do you want to look at the class?
Yeah,
you
thank
can actually
you.
look
Thank
at
you.
the
I appreciate
recruiting
that.
class.
Man.
Do you want me to go first?
Yeah,
and steal
go
your
first.
answer?
Okay, yeah, you go first.
Trent Jones.
Is he? What's with the E?
This morning, I don't know. It could be either. We need Ace. We don't.
No, you can't have a silent E at the end of a
That's
word.
that's how I feel as well.
That's a rule in English, people.
Yeah, we'll find out. We'll get on top of this.
Either way,
ahead, Seth.
there's no accent on the end of his name or anything, but like he is a smaller guy who's going to grow into the yeah. He might be the best offensive lineman in this class, which is a stacked offensive lineman class. It includes Nolan Rumler.
Sure.
I'm gonna go with Eric All.
That's a good
because
one.
I think He's got the sort of downfield ability that we've seen from a guy like Gentry, but with some blocking chops.
I mean, I like Quentin Johnson for this one because he's probably not going to get on the field much next year.
Yeah.
Dax is going to block him. He might come through in year 2, but probably not because he's just learning to play safety. But that athleticism, you let him develop a little bit. You redshirt him, and he's a guy who can really play some man-to-man coverage, and that's what Don Brown really needs out of his safeties, as we've seen. So he's a guy where, as an upperclassman, I think he's going to be a really, really good player. All right, your just overall favorite recruit in the class, not the best recruit, not the worst recruit, not just like the guy you're happy is around.
Do you want me to jump ahead?
Yeah, go ahead.
You can go ahead, yeah.
I'm going with Mazi. Don't call me Aubrey Solomon Smith.
Just because, I mean, why?
Because right now I'm a little terrified of defensive tackle, and
Yeah.
that guy looks like a pretty ready defensive tackle who can, allay those fears. I mean, Hinton is right there as well, but I think Hinton's going to be more of a 3-tech, and yeah.
All right.
I was going to go with that just because it'd be nice to have a nose tackle.
Let me go ahead.
But as far as just favorite guy to watch,
right?
Okay.
Charbonnet. If there was like a Dr. Sapp archive of just Charbonnet films, I'd throw that on. Got the YouTube button on my TV remote. I just put that on in the background all day because he's such a fun runner to watch because he isn't like anyone I've seen committed to Michigan in recent memory.
I mean, he has power, and then he'll do like a jump cut, and you're like, oh.
Yeah, the elusivity, I guess, is really impressive for a guy that big. And nobody takes him down on first hit. It's like a 3-hit process. It's just fun to watch.
So I'm going to go with Cornelius Johnson because his senior highlight tape is bonkers. And not just in the I run away from people bonkers. He adjusts balls downfield. He has a Amara Darbo catch on there.
Mm-hmm.
He's like, there's one. There's an incompletion on the film, so you can see the refs going like, no, no, no. And there's a freeze frame where it's like, yes, his toe was down. So they're like arguing with the refs on the film. I think he's going to be a really, really good player. And I also like that he committed immediately after Mikael Wayne left. Okay, most disappointing development overall for Michigan. You get to go first.
The guy who committed to Ohio State that was supposed to commit to Michigan.
That would be Zach Harrison.
Yeah, that one.
That one.
I understand that one, but what are you doing, Brom? Because that.
What are you doing?
Because Karlaftis is like perfect for this team and perfect for this defense, and instead he's going to be at Purdue after the party.
Yeah, I don't know.
I mean, is Brom looking to like jump to the NFL? Is he just wants to be paid more than the Ohio State coach now?
Doesn't he like drive a Kia?
He drives like a 1984 Chrysler LeBaron or something.
I just find people like that hard to predict.
I mean, that's as soon as I saw his car, I'm like, oh man, Purdue's got a shot here.
Exactly right. Yes.
Because like, that's a guy who's just like, I don't have the same priorities as a lot of people. So, which is, I mean, it's good. It's nice for him.
It is nice to have the Big Ten West kind of flexing again.
Yeah.
Because I think, like, if you look at the class recruiting rankings right now, I know there's still a February signing program, but the top 3 are the top 3, and then afterwards it's all Big Ten West programs.
My most disappointing development is Michigan's in-state recruiting, which, I mean, they got Smith. They got anybody else from Michigan? Surely. Barnhart, that's right.
Yep.
But, like, so, they miss out on 2 in-state 5-star tackles. Like, they piss off Devontae Dobbs because Tim Drevno is just a goon. They piss off his teammate in the same way. They have Tyrese Woods very briefly in the class due to a misunderstanding.
That's
like, what is that? And, like, he's at Belleville, and now he's decommitted, and now he's pissed off. It's like, what? Come on, what's going on there? I think Michigan is actually in a pretty good place to get 4 or 5 of the top 6, 7 guys in state next year. But, man, you have 2 in-state 5-star offensive tackles, and you screw it up so badly with one of them that he doesn't even want to talk to you, despite Michigan State being Michigan State. You lose the other guy to Wisconsin. I kind of get that.
Yeah.
But
I'm surprised that
that
did
one
not
I
happen
understand.
before.
well, I mean, Michigan thought they were going to get him after a pretty good visit, and then he just went off the board, and now he's like a top 30 player.
Right.
So I think they'll find their footing a little bit better this season, but I think they need to, because that's just rough when you got multiple 5-star guys going out of state, and now like Michigan is coming up as a team that actually produces a lot of good players. There's a 4-star guard going to LSU. There's like Dwan Mathis is going to Georgia. Like, this is a state that is kind of up and coming in terms of like football talent, and Michigan needs to do a better job locking it down.
People are finding a lot more of the talent on the west side and the north end than they used to. They used to just focus on Detroit.
Yeah.
All right. I was going to say it's pretty important to reestablish that relationship with Belleville, if only because Selden in the 2020 class is so important to building the rest of that class around them.
Well, yeah, and they do have Selden in 2020, and that's something that I think is important, and hopefully they can not vastly screw it up with what looks like to be the next Cass Tech. Because Cass Tech, if you look going forward, they don't really – it's pretty much over for them. And it's going to be Belleville and West Bloomfield. And
West Bloomfield with Ronnie
West
Bellamy.
Bloomfield.
So.
Yeah.
And they've got Cornell Wheeler. So they've got inroads there to Macari Page.
So, yeah, they'll do better next. But that's kind of like –
West Bloomfield's going to be the new Harrison, because Harrison's closing.
I mean, you look at that in-state class, and you're like, you could like take a couple guys out of this class. Not that I don't like most of the guys in this class, and put in 5-star offensive tackles, and you're like, now we're kind of cooking with gas. So, yep, that's a disappointment. Best recruit, everybody, all at the same time.
Dax Hill.
All right, guys, we're gonna take
that felt a little bit warmer. Can we try it again?
No.
I'm just gonna say it to myself the entire break.
No. We're gonna take another break because we went really, really long. We're gonna briefly talk about Western Michigan, and then we are going to free ourselves from this prison.
Maxton Hill.
Hey, this is Seth from MGoBlog. Like many of you by now, when it was time to refinance my house, I talked to Matt Demarest at Homeshire Lending. Since we had bought only a few years earlier, it was amazing how different the experience was between Matt and our bank. He knows his stuff, gives you and your loan his personal attention, and can shop at different lenders so you're always a priority. We are constantly getting similar feedback from readers who used Homeshire Lending when buying or refinancing a house in Michigan. He knows the mortgage industry well, which becomes a big deal when your loan is as complicated as mine was. If you haven't met him yet, he's tailgating this year with his MGO bus at the Charity Beer Garden on 327 Hoover. And if you're buying or refinancing, reach out to Homeshire Lending, NMLS number 1161358.
Let me just tell you a couple things to keep in your mind while you're out there. When we take the field, we're going to win. We've got big goals. We've got big ideas. We've got to win this game, and there is no game on the remainder of our schedule more important than the one you're going down to the tunnel to play today. Now let's go! Let's go!
Underground Printing is proud to present the Bow Store. Visit us at our new location at 333 South Main or online at www.bow.team.
We have a lot in common. You rode the bus to Bursley, so did Larry Page, and so did I. I think we all love MGoBlog. I'm Nick Hopwood, your MGo financial coach. My entire family went to Michigan State, but I was the smart one, finding my way to Ann Arbor to study econ. I've been a financial planner for 17 years, earning the designation Certified Financial Planner, and founded Peak Wealth Management in Plymouth. Oh, you're pretty smart, and you probably have a sweet retirement spreadsheet already. My job is to make sure. As a financial coach, I make sure you're on track, but if you're not on track, I tell you exactly what you're going to need to do. And if you listen, I'll be able to tell you how your future should look, just like the knowledge. And I have cool charts and graphs to tell the story, sort of like the mathlete. To learn more or schedule time to chat, check out peakwm.com/mgoblog.
The places you'll go may seem far from Ann Arbor. From San Francisco to St. Louis to Shanghai. But as members of the Alumni Association, we're never far. Because Michigan is more than a place. It's a mindset that connects us. For those who leave Michigan, but for whom Michigan never leaves, this is where you belong. The Alumni Association of the University of Michigan. Join today at umalumni.com.
Passion for e-commerce. Sell stuff online. Security. Performance. Conversion. Beautiful user experiences. Better experience utilisator. Monthly marketing. PPC SEO. Make your user a customer. Conversion.
Eau de Parfum for online retailers. Love your website. Let Human Element show you how. Available at human-element.com and fine department stores, not fine department stores.
Welcome to Beard Talk 4.10. 12.
I'm going with it.
You're just going with
yeah,
it? Good,
yeah,
good.
I've given up.
So, that's always what I strive to hear from both wives and coworkers. You have worn me down to a nub. I accede to your... I shouldn't say that out loud, should I? No. All right. So Michigan did play Western Michigan in a frustrating basketball game. Frustrating mostly because, what was his name? Fields? Flowers was just throwing up whatever and it went in, and it's like, I don't know about this. So Michigan's defense has fallen from its perch as the top of the country. It is now third, and I think that's probably more realistic than we're the best defense in the country by like 600 points. When you have a freshman in Iggy going up against Eric Pascal and holding with a 3 of 13 from 2, that does a lot of things. One, it wins you a game, but two, it also sets you up for some unrealistic expectations about your 2-point defense going forward. I was looking at a John Gassaway tweet talking about Michigan's 2-point defense, and he pulled out 3 really good recent 2-point defenses: the 2015 Texas game, the 2015 Kentucky team, and the 2018 Michigan State team. And all these were like the best 2-point defenses in the country and the best in the Ken Pom era by the end of the season. Michigan has already regressed to their season average 11 games in. So they're not going to be the best 2-point defense in the country. And the main reason is that their block rate is like 111th or something.
And those are teams that were stocked with NBA talent.
Right, like you've got Carl Anthony Towns and JJJ and some guy
when he was on the court.
Yes, when he was on the court. And all of those teams were at the top of the nation in block rate. The only reason that all 3 didn't finish first is 2 of them were in the same season. So you got a 20% block rate for Kentucky and 18% block rate for both Michigan State and Texas. That's what you need to do to be so good at 2-point defenses. You just need to have that incredible length up and down your front court. Michigan has one guy in John Teskey who's a pretty good shot blocker, but not an elite one, and then they don't get a lot from the rest of their team. So it's going to be a defense that does a really good job preventing threes, does an acceptable to good job at preventing guys from getting the rim, forces a ton of 2-point jumpers, and is a very good defense, but they just don't have the personnel to be the best team in the country.
I mean, no one's going to, unless you're like a Kentucky and have like a whole bunch of 6-7 NBA guys, you're not going to be able to block bad 2s.
Yeah.
And sometimes they go in, but like if you have a guy like Flowers who's shooting 50%, that's just going to go in. I think the bigger theme here was that the help defense it was Western Michigan, and they weren't.
There's definitely been a little bit of a tune down and focus the last 2 games.
Right, and I'm not that worried about that being something that's going to bite Michigan.
Yeah.
Because they only tune down against teams like that, and they only have a few more of them on the schedule, and they're in the Big Ten.
Well, I mean, the South Carolina game was a little bit of a warning sign, because that's not a good offense, and they still put up 77 points. Some of that felt a little unsustainable, but not all of it when you're letting Silva get to his right hand, that kind of stuff. So, the good news is that whatever rough parts there are on the offense, and there were some in this Western Michigan game, we have a coach who has an incredible track record of working through those things and having kind of a takeoff in the second half of the season. Now, before we were talking about what could possibly get better, and there's definitely like some organization issues that the last couple of games have brought up. Still tracking very well, still tracking towards probably a 1 seed, which would be interesting.
I still bring up that like the 1 year Michigan's finally a 1 seed, we have to play in Columbus.
Yeah, but whatever.
Like Michigan travels well, but like anyone who's interested in going to the game there is just going to be.
Well, if Ohio State makes it, they're not going to be in Columbus. So
no. Ohio State. I don't care about just everyone. People there are going to be Ohio State fans and something else.
Yeah.
Unless Louisville boots us out of there or something, but.
I don't know. I don't necessarily mind. Like Louisville if we get in the South Regional and we get Louisville, that's a pretty drivable distance.
Right.
And we're not going to get Louisville or Kentucky.
Well, Michigan fans are all over the country. It's almost good to have like a California
or New York. Yeah.
Right.
So, but that's maybe something we should be talking about 2 months from now. And after, Michigan's 2-0.
After Michigan romps through the best Big Ten we've had in a while.
Well, I mean, if they get to 15-5 in this Big Ten, they're going to be a 1 seed.
Yeah.
So the number of games that they can drop and still coast in.
There's still, I think, 2 games that Ken Palm projects them to lose, like in Madison and at Breslin.
Yeah, that's it. And the rest of it is like, this is a very, very good team. And it should be good at basketball, and it will continue to do so. All right, folks, this has been a 2-hour-plus podcast, so that's all you get for the basketball. We will be back after the bowl game. So, we got to fire up the music.
Yeah, we have. Don't remember we have this.
We have this little tradition.
This is our last MGoRadio of the year too. So the last time.
Beard talk.
How is your beard doing?
I wanted to trim it today because my mustache is a little bit long and it gets in your food and it's never good. So, you know what? Give it a B.
Okay.
Maybe a B minus. You gotta trim it.
Yeah.
All right. Beard talk.
That was the beard talk of beard talk.
No, stop. Now you stop.
No, not here.
Who's getting better than us? No!